Welcome everybody to the 24th episode of the Left, Right, and Center Show. We're happy to be here. We're going to do some big climate change stuff tonight. It's going to be a lot of fun. We thought we'd do our first sort of in-depth dive, and we'll see exactly how in-depth we can get. But I think it's going to be pretty informational. You know, we really I don't know. We hit the books on this one a little bit, so we'll see what we can do. So how you guys doing tonight, huh?
Pretty good. How are you?
Pretty good. Ready to get back outside and get some natural vitamin D. I don't know about you guys, but when I take vitamin D, I stay up till like 4 o'clock in the morning.
I'll have to start taking that.
I feel like there's a wiener joke in there somewhere.
There's always wiener jokes when you're concerned, Tim.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, so I suppose we can just do. We're gonna do most of the episode on the climate change stuff, but as usual, we're gonna do our news and memes. So let's start out with Tim. What you got?
Me? Oh boy. I don't think we talked about this last week. I had it ready for last week, but if we did, tell me and I'll move on.
No.
It's kind of more news-ish than meme-ish, but it's news that I saw in a meme. So it says, in 2001, Portugal decriminalized all drugs, including cocaine and heroin, while distribution is still illegal. Those caught for personal possession are referred to clinics. Since these moves, drug addiction has dropped 50%, and drug use in Portugal is among the lowest in Europe. I looked briefly into this afterwards. I try and do that a bit when I see these memes. Like, there's another one that I was going to put up today that I looked up, and I was like, I can't find that to be true. So, this one looked to be pretty legit. They did decriminalize at least most drugs, if not all, and their stats look really good now, and they've been consistently dropping. So thought I'd just kind of get your guys' take on it. What's your thought real briefly on drugs and how we should handle them going forward?
I'm pretty much on the side of the fence that we need to have an overhaul in the way we treat drugs in this country. We need to look at it as like a public health crisis, not as a criminal justice problem. And so, yeah, decriminalizing drugs, offering more clinics, offering needle distribution centers, even if these things don't sound like cute ideas, the reality is they do actually work. They do, statistically speaking, ends justify the means. They have an incredible impact in lowering the actual overall usage of heroin and cocaine that has such a detriment to society.
Yeah, I've actually been fascinated with the idea of decriminalization and a couple counterintuitive things, like actually providing clinics where people can go to get heroin in a safe place, in a safe environment, be put in work programs there, right? So like they teach you how to get a job, they give you clothes, they give you a shower, they make the whole thing safe. It's incredible. I don't remember which country it was. It was one of the Sweden or Switzerland or something like that, where they did something quite like Portugal did. But they actually, like I said, they made stations, they made clinics where you could go, you could actually get heroin there. And the requirement was that you had to do it there. You could only do it, I think it was twice a day or something like that. It was rationed. But while you were there, they would work with you. Like they would say, like, hey, I know like this is hard for you. Here's a path off of this into work. And it was very, very successful. And it's one of those amazing things that you think you have to control these problems from a top
law
down.
And order.
What's that?
Law and order.
Yeah, right. Exactly. You think that you have to control these things that way, and a lot of times, all you have to do is relax your grip, and a lot of times the problems can get solved in much different ways.
Yeah. It's similar to a lot of other problems people have, and if something is kind of taboo, it's a lot harder to fix it. To ask for help, to be confident in yourself and trying to find a way to get better. If you're a drug addict, you don't want to tell anybody, right? There's such a negative connotation for being addicted to drugs in this country. I mean, I'm not saying it should be a positive connotation, but you shouldn't look down on somebody, right? They made a mistake. They need help. If they want to get help, they need to be treated with respect. So I think, steps like this would definitely help. Hopefully we can move in that direction.
Right, and and then the amount of externalities that has as well. It's like, think about it. Like the drug cartels in Mexico would just evaporate, right? Obviously they would try to change into something else, but their cash flow coming from the United States would stop, and that is them. They are the cash flow from the drug trade, so it's like, well, you could pretty much fix Mexico by decriminalizing it and growing it here and making it safe and sanitary. Right, you're gonna have people who are no longer overdosing on fentanyl. Like there's way better ways to do it. And I just want to say, like you can speculate all day long about why one way works better than the other way, but some of these countries have tried it, and it seems that even controlling for various factors, like was it going down beforehand or going up beforehand, controlling for a whole bunch of things like that, the statistics don't really lie. And I'm really for, as we'll talk about climate change, I'm really for a statistic and scientific based approach, right? Not an emotional response. Like, I get it, drugs are bad, but if this solves it better, maybe that's the way to go. You really should look at that.
It really does too. Canada is also at the forefront of this with the opioid epidemic, especially. And the numbers everywhere they've done this are incredibly promising, because the reality is a lot of these things, I guess this kind of goes against moderate to conservative, appeal to emotion, right? Because we want law and order. We want to say, no, let's arrest people that are breaking the law. But, that is, as statistics show, just the wrong mentality. So the goal of that is, right? The goal is not to be punitive. The goal is not to have this sense of justice that involves people going to jail to feel good. The goal is to get drugs off the street, right? So if we have a better way of getting drugs off the street, why not do it?
Right. Yeah, I just want to point out the authoritarianism isn't a symptom of the right. There's if you're doing the left-right analysis, also
that's why I said moderate
authoritarians. So gulags were definitely authoritarian, but they were about as left as you get, for example. Anyways, okay, so let me see if I can pull something up here. All right, so Tim actually brought this up yesterday when I was talking to him. I think it was yesterday. Yeah. I don't know if you were there, Chris, but there's this article right here. Now I'm not going to hit this like Tucker Carlson would, but I do want to bring this up and have a conversation about it. So there's this article from The Insider. Biden's press office asked journalists to send questions in advance, drawing mixed reactions from reporters, right? And mixed reactions from me, very honestly. So what do you guys think about that? Because that's it sounds a little bit like the stuff that I've been harping on, where Chris has been saying, oh, thank God we finally get to go back to the no scandal normalcy. And I'm like, okay, so you mean we go back to where the Democrats and the media are in agreement so nothing gets written, right? So this is just more collusion in my point of view.
From a central point of view, when I first read this, my initial thought was, oh, cool, they'll be better prepared or something, right? Like that's really all I thought of it was.
Right, and I sympathize with that actually, because she's doing a lot of circling back. There's actually a meme about it where she doesn't have an answer and she keeps circling back.
Yeah, and so I thought about it, and that's what I thought. And then after I started thinking more into it, and I read the article, I kind of get where they're coming from on that side too. That if they have all of the questions in advance, they're going to be able to pick and choose what they want to talk about, how they want to answer things a lot easier. I don't think that the press conferences should be gotcha moments like, haha, we asked you a question that you weren't ready to answer and now you look dumb. Like, I think that I know that we've talked about this before. They'll never say it, but I think it's totally acceptable if she's like, hey, I'm not prepared to answer that right now. Like, that's never an answer they're going to give, but I think it should be one that they could give. But yeah, I think if that was used as a way to only say, hey, we're going to be more prepared, but we're not going to turn down any question just because it wasn't provided to us or something like that, I think I'd be more on board. But if they're using it as, if you didn't provide the question ahead of time, then we're not going to address it or answer it, then I think that's definitely wrong.
I think it's one of those things that we kind of just have to watch as it happens, because I do feel. Hang on one second. I do feel that, just collecting my thoughts, it is not an uncommon practice. It is strange at the president's level. However, I think and maybe this is my positive bias, but maybe let's just give it a few run-throughs, right? The press secretary, the reality is they're meeting every day. Like this is a constant thing, right? So let's see how it goes. And if it's like truly like, yeah, they're not fielding certain questions.
How are we going to know that though? So like, for example, if Fox News says like, hey, we just found out something like really scandalous about Hunter Biden, we're going to be asking about that today. And then they don't get called on. We don't know that they sent that question in advance. And then we also don't know that Fox News didn't get selected because they had that question to ask. So there's not really
public. What if the question? What if it was public? What if it was like a public website that was like, here's the questions we want to ask, and they're submitted that way, so that everybody can see what questions were going to be asked and if they ignored them or not?
What about just being like actually putting a staff behind her and having her be prepared? Remember Kayleigh McEnany's binder? She had everything, right? When she got asked a question, she would know enough to be talking while she was opening the binder, and then she would flip to the page, and it's all very neatly laid out, and she has every topic.
Yeah,
she was the queen of bullshitting. She was so good.
I do think it's a poor press. It's poor optics, right? Like it doesn't look good because now we're having conversations like this. So maybe this press secretary like genuinely was trying to be well intended and said like, yeah, I can be way more informed for all of these questions, and said it's about the optics of it are now like, well, they can select which questions they want to answer. Whereas it also like press secretary is a shitty job, guys. Like it is like an thankless job because like, think about it, right? You have to both not fuck up and make sure that you're articulating everything you need to articulate to the press and in turn the world, at least the country, while also speaking honestly and accurately to the actual president's agenda. You are simply an extension of the president's thoughts in that moment. And so you also need to make sure you don't say a binding statement that now locks the president into something. Because then one of two things happens. You either accidentally change the president's stance on a policy, or you end up with the president having to openly say, that was not what I expected you to say, and then either fire the press secretary, or it looks like there's like, disarray in the makeup of the cabinet.
Right.
I think to go back to one thing you said, which was we have to assume that she or they, whoever decided to request this, had the best of intentions. I actually think that's true. I think generally if you have malice intent, you think more heavily about how what you're asking or what you're saying is going to be interpreted. And it's pretty clear they didn't think much about that for this, right? They were just like, oh yeah, we could, what if we get this stuff ahead of time? We can be better prepared. Yeah, let's ask for that. Right? If they were like, hey, maybe we can use this as a way to trick people and not answer bad questions. Somebody would have been like, oh, by the way, they're going to, as soon as you ask for this, someone's going to be like, yeah, that sounds shady.
And hey, for what it's worth, maybe why do you have to answer bad questions? Like, honest to God, if someone asks like, hey, what is, I don't know, does Joe Biden believe in Jewish space lasers? It's just a dumb question. Maybe they can mitigate those things. Like, of course he doesn't.
I'm gonna bring that up when you bring up Majorgi.
Dude, I want to be press secretary, man. I'd have so much fun.
No, you don't. Okay, sure you do.
They would ask that, and I'd be like, we are putting together a commission to...
We're putting together a committee on that.
Committees for everything. No, it's a really rough job because you really end up just like... The press is constantly trying to trip you up. You're constantly trying to balance good merit with the president. It's a mess. It's just a total mess.
Well, at least Jen Psaki can relax for the next 4 years because the press is going to go easy on her. She just has to be careful when Fox News opens their mouth.
Basically. Maybe not. I mean, people are a little bit more harsh on Democratic presidents than you anticipate. If you go look back at Obama, he had some really like everything he did from all sides. Fox News was notorious. They get the big sound bites, but you look at anything like, what was that? Oh, let me check it out. Give me 1 second. Tim, don't you dare take it whatever picture you got going.
Closing it.
Oh man, really?
I didn't make it. but it is pretty funny.
Do you see it?
It's not loading on my end.
Really? Oh, it's a Death Star, but instead of how the beams normally come out, it's in the shape of a
Star
Jewish
of
star.
David.
Star of David, yeah. And
That's
then the
amazing.
main beam coming out of it.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
You have to be there. You'd have to see it. Anyway.
You have you're holding a meme for Chris, right?
Oh, I gotta pull it up. Which one you want, Chris?
Which one are you gonna pull up? We can go for Marjorie Green.
Alrighty. It's just a picture of her, right?
Yeah, so I figured I would just like speak openly on Marjorie Green right now. So you have the House Majority Leader today, full blown denouncing Marjorie Green, like basically saying like basically condemning her statement, saying like, hey, everything she said we disagree with, and now that she's in public office, we need to hold her to a higher standard because she's now in elected office. I will continue to condemn everything that she says if it is indeed like, QAnon supporting, white supremacist, Jewish space lasers. Like, he straight out condemned her, but then swiftly goes and says Democrats are making this a partisan issue, when it's like, oh my gosh, this is not a partisan issue. Like, you literally have a white supremacist in office. Like, we should not have to.
Wait, hold on. Is she a white supremacist?
Oh, categorically. There's like, and let's just say, let me take that step back because I don't want to get lost in translation. Because I think that's maybe something that conservatives are grasping to.
I'm going to search while you're talking.
This person literally denied mass shootings. And now we're in a situation where Democrats are being told to lower the temperature because we're trying to get her off of committees. It's like, this is not someone who should be representing the public. There should be consequences, swift consequences for people who are making statements. It's one thing to just, have some hyper conservative, hyper liberal beliefs like AOC, right? Or let's say Rand Paul. You guys probably see AOC the same way we see Rand
I
Paul.
guess.
Yeah, well, we see Rand Paul the same way you guys see AOC. If that helps, like
Rand Paul.
What?
Rand Paul?
Yeah, honest to God, like, because he votes a little crazy, like trying to not give 9/11 firefighters pensions, like that. He votes a little crazy, like super conservative. Like, we can't spend any government money. And in AOC, we're like, yeah, let's spend the money. Marjorie Green is not partisan. Like, she is just simply, she's going to tarnish the party. And basically, she's so insulated by this Trump endorsement. She's so insulated by it because she's basically is like, you can't condemn her within the party because so many other people are afraid of the consequences with voting. Terrifying.
But you just said that the House Majority Leader condemned her.
Well, verbally, but without any consequence. Whereas they literally are looking to censor Liz Cheney simply because she voted for impeachment. You're going to see Liz Cheney get actual consequences. Whereas, a verbal like slap on the wrist is not a consequence.
So, okay, so there's a couple distinctions here, and I kind of want to talk about this because Ben has also been talking about this, and I agree with him on this. So every time a Republican messes up, every single Republican has to answer for that Republican. Meanwhile, Republicans are not asking Democrats, like every Democratic politician is not held accountable whenever a Democratic person messes up because we know that you all don't agree with that person, right? So in the way that is the case, she does not represent the party whatsoever. But there's going to be a move to make, by the left-wing media, to make Majority Taylor Green Taylor to be the face of the Republican Party.
Because this is wrong. This is incorrect. When Al Franken, senator from Minnesota, had an issue with sexual assault allegations, immediately every single Democrat came out, condemned him, and he stepped down. That's not the only time this has happened. When something goes beyond party, or goes beyond party politics, Democrats swiftly condemn within ourselves. And
Okay.
not only do we condemn, we pull off too. Look, AOC, Ilhan Omar, they're not doing things that are, in violation of human rights. They're not in violation of like social norms. Sure, they get a little hot. They get a little like,
Okay, Rashida Tlaib is and Ilhan Omar are very arguably anti-Semitic, so pretty openly anti-Semitic.
No, they're just anti-funding Israel, which is different.
That's right. That's an interesting conversation, but so then explain.
I think that's a clear distinction. But one thing I wanted to say on your comment was, I think that's a very biased view, and similar to other things we've talked about. I think if you were to take a step back and really look into what you said, you'd find it to not be true that Republicans don't hold the Democratic Party responsible for things that the individual Democrats do. That isn't true. Yes, you guys do. And at the same time, you guys take responsibility sometimes for stuff that people in your party do, and the Democratic Party doesn't always hold everyone responsible. Like to take the stance that you took there, I think is very closed-viewed and closed-minded.
Yeah, I could see that. But let's take this for example, right? So let's say the difference between God, her name is so long. She needs to, what is it? What would it be? MGT?
M. Night Shyamalan?
What's her full name? Marjorie Taylor Greene or Green Taylor?
Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Marjorie Taylor Greene.
MTG. Okay, so we're gonna call her MTG and then do AOC, right? So like for example, the difference between like people are saying that she's the AOC of the right.
She's not. Right? She's an extreme of the right. She's
okay, but AOC is the extreme of the left.
Yeah, sure, but I mean, AOC is not out here.
Right. So the difference, again, this is kind of what I'm getting at here. The difference is that the right does not agree with her. She is a conspiracy theorist. She's crazy. We don't endorse her views.
And that's why we think that she should be stripped from her committee assignments. Why? Because she
all the stuff you're talking about she did before she got elected, which means you're trying to deny the will of her voters.
Yes, because first and foremost, she won a primary because she was one of 9 other candidates. And so it was a very strange non-majority winning vote primary, which is odd.
How primaries work?
Normally no, to be honest. And this is, I guess, like an insider thing, but typically when you're having a primary for a deep red or deep blue seat, you might have like 3 or 4 candidates, but then you get a nomination for 1 or 2 of them. It's usually not anywhere near the 9 candidates. That's pretty high. Because typically it's like you already have a chosen person that's like ready to go for it. You know what I mean? Like there's already like somebody in line, and then in this case, a lot of people tried to skip the line, which ends up somehow Marjorie Greene is the one that got pushed over to skip the line. When you are in public office, I'll draw a line here. I'll draw a line here. I think it's unfair for someone like Brett Kavanaugh to have his high school yearbook brought up in a congressional hearing. I don't think it was unfair to have the sexual assault accusations brought up, because that is a potential egregious flaw of character. I will say that if you are a member of Congress, this is stuff that happens in your youth. That's different, right? I think there's a fair line to say, yeah, as a 22-year-old, if Marjorie Greene was out here saying this stuff, that's probably not forgivable. But let's give her a sense of like she was in college, she was still growing through her extreme years, but this was happening like months ago, dude. This was not years ago.
So listen here. So I see what you're saying, and here's what I'm gonna tell you and everybody that wants her out for her commissions and all of her duties and stuff like that. Tell it to her voters, right? It's just not up to you who comes from her district. She got voted in. Unless she does something that is considered misconduct now, you really don't. You have no leg to stand on.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And I wanted to make a comment too on something that you said, Chris, and that you said, in talking about how Marjorie Taylor Greene is similar to AOC and that they're both on the extremes. You said that AOC hasn't done anything. I know. And so Chris's response was, AOC hasn't done anything crazy. She doesn't really break social norms, but she might not break your social norms, but she breaks social norms for the other side, for the Republican Party, right? And I think the important thing to keep in mind for both parties in this is that when people are from the extreme of the other party, they're very far extreme from you compared to where they are from the others, right?
I think a better way to clarify my problem with this and why I actually want to stop the comparison altogether is because we are conflating policy extremism with ideological extremism. And that is not something I want to see.
No, that's not the case. It's the same thing.
Not at all. AOC.
One is extremely conservative and one is extremely liberal. One's
no way.
Push
Marjorie Greene shouting at school shooting survivors is not a conservative belief. It is a ideologically extreme belief. Fighting for an absurd spending bill on the Green New Deal is
so you're cherry picking now. So how about berating berating ICE agents at a border camp, right, in front of the press? How's that?
We're locking up children at the border, and where there's been
for separating children from potential human traffickers.
We're also having extremely high rates of sexual abuse on these kids and women that are in these prisons from ICE members.
Okay, so did the guard that she berated do those things?
It doesn't matter. I think the point's valid in saying that, like, regardless if you believe in the underlying reason they were doing it or not, berating somebody is still the same activity. Right? No, you're acting like one is way more extreme than the other, and I agree they're both extreme and in different ways. But for the other side, from where you're at, they are massively extreme.
I think we're falling down the rabbit hole of where every single time, like Obama or Bush, this happened to Bush too. I'm going to give Bush and Obama as like the old school party members of Republicans and Democrats. Every time Bush did something, they also felt the need to find something on the other side to compare to. Every time Obama did something, they found something on the other side. Like you have to, as if we have to have both sides of the story. And I don't think there are two sides of the story because AOC.
I know you don't, man. I'm trying to tell you there is.
There's not. And I think that's the problem. And I guess that's my argument on this is that when we look at someone like AOC, she is a policy spending extremist. She wants like very, very progressive reform on her agendas. But she's not, she's not pro-insurrection on the Capitol. She's not pro-QAnon. She's not like Jewish space lasers. These are conspiracy theories, and conspiracy theories are not political. They're conspiracy.
Yeah, what you're not getting, I think, is that the people on the other side of the aisle from you, the people that are far right, think all of those things that AOC wants to do are as bad as you think a Jewish space laser is. That's the point I'm trying to make.
I see.
And you guys are on the opposite side of the belief wheel. And so these people are as extreme from each other, right? For like as extreme as Marjorie is to you, AOC is to them.
That terrifies me then. And the reason that terrifies me is because when I think of the political equivalent of AOC, I think of someone such as Ted Cruz who shuts down the government, or Rand Paul who votes against 9/11 pensions for firefighters.
Your Overton window is a little messed up. Those guys are center line Republican.
No, they're pretty far on the.
Rand Paul is libertarian, which is down. That's not right. Right? He's just fiscally responsive.
And that's who I think is, and that's what I'm saying. I think that those are the inverse of AOC. AOC is like,
okay, so here's the problem. If you think that Rand Paul is the inverse of AOC, then you're actually, so on the political compass, Rand Paul is sort of bottom right, and I'm doing this probably backwards for everybody else. So Rand Paul is bottom right. If you're putting Rand Paul opposite of AOC, that puts AOC as top left, which is Stalin. Which I would agree with, but I'm surprised that you're saying that.
Well, what I'm saying is that AOC is policy-based extreme, right? but she's not conspiracy.
She's also an inflammatory clapback queen.
Yeah,
whose rhetoric is a very large part in the disintegration of the American Republic. So
it's like keeping up with the change of the times. But yeah, sure, she gets a little incendiary sometimes. That's very different than thinking.
I can say that about everybody that you don't like on the right.
I'm sorry, but Jewish are not the Green New Deal.
We had a similar conversation.
Okay, we had a similar conversation. So let me just say there is a difference. I don't support MGT or whatever the heck her initials are. You support AOC, right? So there is a difference.
Well, that's not even the big difference, though.
The second AOC comes out with like a KKK hood, or
why would you name a far right thing and then say I wouldn't support her? Maybe name something that's extreme far left, and then say you wouldn't support her. That would be more valid.
I respect Ron Paul. I respect Rand Paul. I disagree with probably 99% of what he believes. I respect him in the Senate. I respect there's a couple the congressman from Texas. I'm forgetting his name right now, but I can respect him. I even have a little bit of respect for someone like Rick Scott. Total disagreement on 100% of political beliefs with him, except maybe adoption. And I respect AOC. I do not respect Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Yep, neither do I.
Kelly. I do not respect the Machine Gun Kelly of the Republican Party.
Right. Okay. So this is part of the problem. This is exactly what I was saying. Is that?
But no, find someone that
an effort to tar and feather the right with this person that none of us agree with. You agree with AOC, and that is why she's different.
I don't think it's fair to say none. She did get elected.
I think the problem is that I'm tar and feathering the right because I want this person stripped of their committee assignments. I want them not to have power in Congress.
But listen, there's a difference between principally saying this person got elected by their constituent and it's not my fucking job to tell them they're wrong, versus just doing whatever you want with the person. Right? We live in a constitutional republic. This person was elected, and until they do a misdeed in office, right, or something comes to light that we didn't know about when she got elected, then there's nothing you can do. We can hold on one hand that this person was elected, and we disagree with them. That's how the right operates. That's a principled stance, right?
Yeah, I'm not a fan of the precedence of saying that somebody got duly elected but because I don't like them and I don't think they are a good fit for the country, that they should just be taken out, even though their group elected them.
Let's say all right, so I'm going to give an inverse scenario. Let's say
we got to move on. So I want to do a couple more memes, but do your thing. We'll try to do a couple more memes.
One quick. Let's say Chris Murphy, senator from Connecticut. I'm just arbitrarily picking him because easy name. Let's say it turns out that before he was elected Senate, he was part of like the Hitler Youth and spent like 20 years being a Nazi and then put all of his Nazi propaganda away in a closet, never talked about it, all comes out. How would you want Chris Murphy treated if he continued to get reelected by his constituents?
So there's a couple different problems in there, right? I'll respond to that real quick. So, number one is you said that it came out after he got elected that happened.
After he gets elected, finds out, and he says, "Oh, well, I don't do it anymore. Don't worry about it."
But he did say he continued to get elected afterwards, so
and continues to be reelected by his constituents. There's absolutely zero electoral penalty.
The problem is that there's a bunch of Nazis or Nazi sympathizers in his constituents. That's a problem you can't really fix.
Or people, hold on, or people that forgive him for whatever he did and have gotten past it. It doesn't mean that they're sympathizers or believe in it.
Right. Sorry, I misspoke. So again, the mechanisms for controlling people's behavior in office or assessing people to be in office is the democratic process. It's not by fiat. You don't get to just decide that I really dislike what this person stood for in the past, and so I don't want them in, even though they just got elected.
Yeah. I guess we can just hope that she gets unelected in 2 years.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, right? Yeah. And I was with you when Steve King said his white nationalist comments, and we primaried the shit out of him, and we got him out of there because we don't want that.
And there are already some pretty powerful primary challenges and Democrats running against Marjorie Greene.
Right, and it's legal to donate to them, so I would donate.
I will be donating to their campaign.
I mean. Ben Shapiro brings this up every time, but he maxed out to Steve King's opponent when it came out that he was a white nationalist. A whole bunch of prominent Republicans did that because we don't want that.
Yeah, no, I mean that's important. So I guess on some of this we'll agree to disagree. On other things, I guess it just comes to say, all right, let's get her unelected.
Yeah. Okay. Whose turn is it? My turn? Or is it Tim's turn?
Sure. Your turn. Bud.
All right, we'll try to rapid fire. We're gonna get into the main topic here pretty soon, which I'm real excited for. But speaking of AOC, I might as well just do this one since we're talking about her. So, I mean, and this is a huge conversation. But again, like firebrand, socialist, end of the United States of America. Like this statement right here. Let me read it to you. So, in a time when about 60% of American workers make less than $40,000 a year, billionaires should not exist. And I just have like a one-word question, which is why?
All right. So I'll answer this because I can speak on it. And I actually agree with this. I think that, and I know both of you are probably going to like vehemently disagree with this, and I'm prepared for that. But this is the point of this podcast is like express political positions. And so most people on the left disagree, and we believe that billionaires are shouldn't exist. We don't. That's not saying we want to murder them all. We're not trying to like eat the rich. Although sometimes I guess we joke around with it, but or we literally want to eat the rich. No, I think that redistribution of wealth. In all seriousness, what we want to do is we believe that in a society it is to be. I get it. I'm ready for it. I'm ready for it to be like, that's not right. That's wrong. But we believe that to amass the wealth that requires you to become a billionaire, you must have done something inequitable to get to that point. And or to have that amount of wealth is inequitable to a society because the money is no longer in the public domain at the same rate as it would be if it was amongst its people. I get it. You're going to say, well, 300 million people, you create an innovative idea, everybody buys a $500 product, that creates a billionaire, that's like helping society, all that good stuff. I prepared for it. I'm just simply sharing the ideological presumption. We all know that billionaires aren't going anywhere. That's not going to change. We're not actively fighting billionaires. Maybe some people are, but most of us like, yeah, just kind of like necessary evil in the world. And that's how we treat billionaires. Necessary evil. We get it. They exist. And they've amassed wealth. They've worked really hard to get where they are maybe. But at some point in time, to become a billionaire, you must have like cut somebody off. You must have done something that would have been inequitable to a lot of people. The easy straw polls here: Trump not paying the dude who like installs a piano in one of his hotels, cuts him off $70,000. People buying out small businesses, Amazon stealing products from the tripod thing, which happens across 10,000 other products, where they say, well, why don't we just steal and copy this idea, change a little bit, and produce it in our manufacturing facility? Messed up stuff like that. I get it. Not all billionaires are like that. Look at Howard Schultz. He does some cool stuff. But even then, we're like, well, if you hold on that amount of wealth, why don't you donate it? I get it. These are hard accusations to be making from the other side, but that's what the left typically believes.
I would look, and we don't need to get into it too much. It just, I would caution you and anybody on the left who says billionaires shouldn't exist, that they must have screwed somebody over, that they must have taken people's labor. It has the quality of a religious statement, right? It's something that you say because it sounds good and you believe it. But in reality, there's in the realm of billionaires, I would assume that you have the normal flavor of humanity, right? There's probably good people, bad people, and mediocre character people. So Trump not paying that piano guy, maybe there's more to that story. Maybe Trump's an asshole. We already know Trump's an asshole, so that one's not too hard. But he's just one billionaire, right? And there's plenty others out there.
I agree. I think it's much more complex. You have the Warren Buffetts who literally donated all their money. You have the Bill Gates who donated all their money.
Yeah. So billionaires. So if AOC were to have said billionaires who screw people over to get there should not exist, I'm with you 100%. But saying billionaires should not exist is classist. Actually, it's lumping a whole bunch of people that exist in one class into a group and then saying that group is bad, and that kind of stuff is literally how you get it's not how you get the revolution, but that's how in a revolution you end up massacring the upper class because you
Yeah,
judge
it's
all-
us versus them mentality, which can be problematic. Although,
is very problematic.
Yeah,
It's
sure.
one of the worst things ever. Right? That's you actually are correct to call out the right on the us versus them thing, especially when you talk about immigration. You should be hitting that and holding people responsible for that. Us
Yeah.
versus them is one of the largest drivers of human death since civilization started, I would say.
absolutely, it's the whole idea of like, I don't know, you guys ever read that like kid story, like, you know, the shadow things? They first they came for like the rabbits, and then they came for the turtles, and then everybody else were like, oh, they're only coming for the turtles, so whatever. It's that whole idea.
I never did.
It's a great one. It's read in a lot of elementary schools. It's about the Holocaust, but it's not partisan. It's some like liberal thing. Like, you're not going to read it and be like, these freaking progressives
No,
and
I
their
can already tell.
stupid shadow rabbits. Yeah.
All right, Tim. Anything to say before we do someone else's, Chris's?
Yeah,
Billionaire? You want to be a billionaire?
I would like to be a billionaire. Yeah, that'd be nice. I'm okay with having it become more difficult to increase your wealth as you become wealthier, right? So increasing in taxes as you get higher. And I don't know what the right levels are or whatever, but I'm okay with that happening, right? Once you get to a certain wealth point, you know, a certain amount of it goes back to the society that got you there or something, right? I'm kind of on board with
I
that.
just
But
got to say this, that's
it shouldn't be a disincentive to continue trying, and to, like, if you're really good at something, if you're really good at building businesses or running businesses or doing whatever, like, why would you want to disincentivize people from doing it, right? So you still need to have the incentive. You still need to, you know, have the reason for people to get up. To be honest with you, Bezos isn't doing this shit anymore because he needs more money, right? This is ingrained in him. He's just a hard
not about
worker.
the money.
Right. So I think it works on both sides. The argument to say, well, if you raise their taxes, they're going to stop working. He's not working for money at this point anyway. Right. So, you know, to some extent, that's probably not true. But at the other hand, he might go do something else, or who knows. But I also don't think that we should focus on equality and equity and things like that. I think we need to focus on making things better for everybody, but not necessarily trying to pull everybody to the same level, especially, you know, it's funny too, because we look at the U.S. and say, well, everybody in the U.S. should be equal, but we don't say everybody in the world should be equal.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And if we did that, we would all be living in shacks and generally, right? No, hardly any power, any money, any our quality of life is so far above the average in the world. But I don't hear anyone from the left saying, hey, we should give all our shit to everybody else in the world to make everyone equal.
That is an excellent segue into the climate change thing. But I don't know if we want to do one more Chris meme.
Yeah, if we can just pull up the AOC picture. I do just want to speak on AOC in a really positive light for a second. Something that I just want to like.
I'm just gonna
and this is more, this actually takes policy and I just out of the equation for a second, and I really hope that we can just like I don't know, for viewers that watch us today or in the future, hope that we can just, you know, especially clear air, especially for those on the right potentially, where I'm seeing a lot of this. Not accusing all of the right, but I'm seeing this a lot on my Facebook, and it really makes me sad, dude. So AOC like she wasn't allowed to speak for a minute because there was investigations going on at the Capitol. So, you know, congressmen and women couldn't just come out and be like, yeah, this is what happened to me that day. But now AOC basically can do that. And she shared on Instagram Live, which is, like, that's the millennial version of Twitter. I mean, we that's how you hit audiences, right? Like it's like Trump tweeting. And she basically shared, it's like, you know, when she was in the Capitol, there was a moment of like severe panic for her because people had broken into the office building. They had broken into the dome. To give you guys an idea, I don't know if have you guys been to DC?
Yep.
In the Capitol?
Been there, I haven't been in the Capitol.
Okay, so to get to I don't know what office building AOC is in. I was in Dirksen. It's very easy to get there from the dome. It's very, very easy. And there was rioters that made it into the offices, as you saw with Pelosi. So it's not like the dome and the office buildings are all connected really closely. Like you, oftentimes I would walk between the dome and the my office instead of taking the underground subway. So, and when I say underground subway, it's just one line that drives one way to the other. And she was in her office. She ran there. They're like, to hide because like we don't know what to do. And she gets into the bathroom and she's like has herself pressed behind the door. And someone breaks into the door into her office, like her perception, screaming like, "Where is she? Where is the?" And opens the door to the bathroom. Actually, the door like pretty much hits her because she's hiding behind it. Looks around in the bathroom, like cartoon level, misses her and runs back out. And so she's terrified, and she opens up. And AOC was a sexual assault survivor. Like, can you imagine how traumatizing that is? Mm-hmm. Like to experience, like you hear bombs, explosions, things breaking, screams. Someone comes into your office. Turns out the guy was a police officer looking for her later. There's no way she could have known that. There's no way she could have known that in that minute. That's so traumatizing. I'm like tearing up because like I've been through some messed up stuff in life. Like I'd be just as terrified in that minute. And now when we reflect, she had every reason. These people like actually wanted to murder congressmen and women, including I guess Mike Pence, which is absurd to me. And she's basically just like. And this is a big thing in the world of trauma, like in abusers. It's like, people will, abusers will manipulate stories. They'll manipulate things. They'll be like, oh, no, we just have to move on from this. Like, we just have to get by this. But it's like, no, we have to actually acknowledge it for what it was. This is a deep, deep travesty. And I get it. FBI is arresting people. But we can't just let this go and move forward. We have to. There is a social reconciliation that has to occur from this insurrection, sure, but more than that, we have to be honest and say like, yeah, let's condemn this. Like, why on earth did senators still vote to overturn the election after this? And what AOC, what I want to get to explicitly is like, there's this trend on social media right now of discrediting her and saying, oh. She just wants attention, and I saw it like 5 times today. Like there's a decent amount of conservatives on my Facebook. I saw 5 separate posts, all with that talking point, like them explicitly writing like she's doing this for attention, and it's just like, fuck, man, can we just stop making everything as if it needs to be a PR thing? Like this is not a policy based thing. This is like a survivor of a serious assault going through severe trauma again. Can we just say, damn AOC, like, I'm sorry you had to go through that. Like, why can't we just collectively say that? And for all the other congressmen and women too, like on both sides of the aisle that were freaking out. Like, can we just, for 1 second, actually just say, no, she's not trying to get attention. This isn't about party. This isn't about politics. And be like, fuck, man, I'm sorry, AOC. Like, that's what I just want to get off my chest on some serious like stress I'm seeing on like Twitter and Facebook.
Right. So, okay. So all of the people that I listened to were very minus Steven Crowder, but even him more than usual, were very measured in the way that they came at this. Especially at first. A little bit later, it came out that there might have been some inaccuracies in what she said, but all of them, including me and including most rational people, like, look, we get it. We know a whole bunch of facts post afterhand, right? So after the fact, we know that there were a few people who wanted to murder Pence and a few other people, or whatever they could do. We know there were some people with malintent there. Back then, they didn't even know. So that either means you could be thinking the worst, or you could just not know what's going on. So everybody, all the conservatives that I respect and listen to, expressed that they don't blame her for being scared. It is a really shitty look for hiding in the bathroom like that. You're supposed to be a leader. Yeah, some people were saying that, but not a lot of people were.
I think all of us are hiding in the bathroom too. I'd hide in the bathroom. Are you kidding me?
Right. But as Tim says a lot, just symbolism matters. I think you say that too, right? Symbolism matters.
I'm not. Like, let's be totally upfront here. Like, men and women have different physique. Like, AOC is like a very human being.
I'm not arguing it. I'm not even saying it's rational.
Sure, like maybe like if you were the Hulk, maybe if you were like, Arnold Schwarzenegger in the Senate, yeah, he can beat the shit out of some people.
Listen, I agree with you. I'm not arguing that. I heard that tossed around a little bit, but like honestly, again, not much. Now, there's one thing that I have to say, and I don't think she did this on purpose, but there's a conversational tactic that you can use. Again, I don't think she did it on purpose, but even right now, it's molding how this conversation is going right now, because we have to be very careful, right? So we're not allowed to question anything she said because she put her story of sexual assault in there, right? And again, it's even right now as I'm doing this, I'm stuttering because I have to be very careful because she brought up her sexual allegation assaults, right? And so whether she did it on purpose or not, it's not really appropriate in the conversation, because now I can't talk about her story out of fear of being called, like insensitive to her survivor story, right? And then additionally, the thing that I do blame her for is comparing Ted Cruz to her alleged rapist. That's disgusting. I understand she went through trauma, but she's an elected official and she probably should be a little bit more measured in her tone. Other than that, I sympathize with her. Okay? Yeah. Other than that, I 100% sympathize with her, and I want all of the followers of QAnon to relax your shit, do your homework, stop being crazy, don't ever go into the Capitol again without doing 10 hours of homework.
Without a Toro guide.
Without a Toro guide.
And I want to be really clear. I'm not sharing this to like get some confirmation from you or be like, finally, I got a conservative to say, yeah. Like, I'm just saying it because it was like one of those things. I'm like, yeah, this is pretty messed up on Facebook. I'm like, I just want to hope people can see like I guess it's just an actual temperature cool down. Like, let's just like really for a second just be like, all right, not everything has to be about like the party. Like, at the end of the day, let's just for a second, let's just be like, all right, AOC is a person. Like, let's just And I get it. I'm sure I owe that to people on the right too. I owe that to the people on the right as well. So
a lot of the times, when you're having, and this is to everybody who's watching too, if you have friends across the aisle, you have people that you're talking to, remember, a lot of the times you might not believe the stuff that they're telling you, but a lot of times if they're telling you it and it turns out to be true, it's a good thing, right? So like for you, Chris, like I'm telling you that a lot of all of the conservatives that I watch and respect were actually very measured in how they approach this, right? They actually respect her story. Not a single one of them made fun of her for hiding in the bathroom. I'm sure that happened. I'm sure there were people who did that. Probably like figures like Milo Yiannopoulos, who I never watch anymore. But like, I'm sure the Firebrand.
Still around?
He tried to make a comeback recently, but he's not.
Yeah.
But so just so you know, I mean, it could be worse, I guess. So. All right,
I guess
you want to switch over after that? We'll switch over to the main topic. Sure. Good Lord, it's 9:24 already.
I have a really fun one. I'm going to read it, and then we don't have to talk. The First Amendment, 1984, and the Bible got to be the 3 top most cited materials by people who didn't read them.
Probably.
I thought that was pretty funny.
It was pretty funny.
Actually, I had to be the stick in the mud, but I just kind of disagree. I disagree with all 3. Just like not even because they want to, just because people who go to church, they're always like, "All right, please open to Book of Mark, chapter 2."
Yeah, but it's always the same 3 pages. You just keep going back and forth. You don't like sit and read the whole book.
I don't know about you. I mean, okay, whatever. Not to share my story. I guess it's anecdotal, but I mean, we always skipped around everywhere.
That's the point.
Anyway.
I think, real quick, if anybody does want a really good, theological overview of Christianity, other major religions, History of God is a really good book. It's written by someone who has their PhD in divination, whatever. I don't know, but it's. I don't know why I can't speak right now, but it's a very favoring towards one religion type of book. It's just like very like to the script, like, hey, this is historically kind of what we see happening across like the world's major religions, and it's actually really cool. So,
all right. So yeah, check that out, people. All right, how do we, Tim?
Yes.
Go for it. So we're gonna do this. We're gonna do this in a semi-organized fashion. We're gonna see how this goes. We'll see how much time we have. We're gonna have Tim give you the lowdown. So here's the big thing, real quick. Tim's gonna explain why, but most of the people on this podcast already agree that global warming and climate change is happening. If you're watching this and you don't agree with that, definitely send us a link. Put something in the comments. Explain why you don't think global warming, man-made global warming, is happening. We'd love to hear that. I love hearing alternative points of view. But for today's purposes, the going forward assumption is that the climate is changing. It is getting warmer, and it is largely man-made. Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, to that point, when we first decided we were going to talk about global warming, I was prepared to try and explain why it's prove that it's happening, and show that heavily it's linked to mankind. And as we started talking about it, all three of us were all like, yeah, we all kind of agree on that. So we don't want to harp too much on that, but I wanted to just show a couple data points for people that weren't sure, or to kind of give us a baseline to talk about. So one of them that I found super interesting and worth showing is the carbon dioxide levels, parts per million, over the last, million or so years, 800,000 years. And you can see that it does. It fluctuates, a significant amount over that time period. And for anyone that doesn't know how they know this, like how do we go back 800,000 years to find out? They do ice core samples.
Yeah, I thought the Earth was created 6,000 years ago.
What?
I thought the Earth was created 6,000. How are you going to have a geological record? Okay, Tim.
Yeah,
right.
guys.
This is before the Big Bang. Okay. Yeah. So they do ice core samples. The glaciers and the ice in the Arctic and all of that. It's formed by snow falling and then not melting, and then more snow falling the year after. And when snow falls, it captures atmosphere inside of the ice. You get little air pockets. They core all the way down. And they can see how long ago it was. You can go back, far distances. So at least 800,000 years for this particular data. So anyway, this is just showing parts per million carbon dioxide in the air. It goes up and down, as does the temperature. It cycles. And the next one I wanted to show was this particular one doesn't go back as far, but that's because I want to show something else on this page. But this shows the average. I think this is the average global temperature, global land ocean temperature index. I think it's kind of like average global temperature. And you can see that there's some fluctuation, but as you get into the 70s and on, it's a pretty steady increase. And there's, the argument some people make is as you go farther back, the temperature fluctuates up and down a lot too. And it does, but from everything the data shows, really this is an anomaly. Right. So it's something that they hadn't seen happen as fast like that before. But this is what I really wanted to show on. I thought I like colors, I like maps. So as this is the same data, but just shown where those temperature readings are taken around the globe, and the colors tell a big story. So as you go, you can see some warming, some cooling, some warming, some cooling. And then as you get into 1950s, 60s, still that way. And then as you get into the 70s and beyond, it just continues to warm. It doesn't really cool. So the scientific consensus is generally there that yes, we have global warming. It is a thing. We have the data. We're seeing it. It's happening. You can still get snow, right? All the water's not going to just straight evaporate. This isn't like we're 100 degrees hotter. We're 1 degree hotter, half a degree hotter, right? If you look down here in this scale, it ranges from -4 to +4 degrees Fahrenheit on average, right? So it's not like we have turned the oven on yet, and that's why we don't notice it. It's a slow boil, but it's happening. And back to this one, it shows that CO2 levels in the atmosphere have spiked at an astronomically fast pace and high level compared to historical norms. So the way we were gonna do this is Chris was gonna go first and just kind of talk about his beliefs on why, or what we need to do basically. What's the solutions? What's the dangers, etc.
Sure. So I think what's so funny is, I mean, I pretty much had the same thought on this. As like, wow, I was worried that we'd have to make the case of like, yes, global warming is real, but really it's more of just like,
we both thought you were like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I did. It was anticipating like full blown conspiracy, Nate, for a second. But I'm glad.
No, I'll be conspiratorial enough for you tonight. So.
Yeah, well, I know that it is still somewhat prevalent in at least a minority faction of the party at this point, but glad to see it's not like the majority kind of theme, at least. But for me, when we think about global warming, it really comes into, I guess, optimism versus like cynicism, where it's like, can we actually stop this anymore? And most science, coming from NASA, coming from other leading schools of thought, such as Yale, are under the and Yale is a leading environmental science tank of thought at this point. Is the presumption is yes, we can kind of stop this. If today, right now, a good point to build on Tim is if we stopped all carbon emissions right now, today, everyone went into the Stone Age again. Climate change actually wouldn't stop. It would actually continue for another couple years, because the impact is already there at this point. And so we're going to have to live with the consequences of not stopping it up to now. So, however, there is a lot of thought to believe that if we can slow down and stop certain levels of carbon emissions, which are contributing, as we know, like unequivocally, without doubt, to climate change, then we can avoid the most severe consequences of the ocean warming to a point that mass hurricanes, flooding, Arctics, all the good stuff, right? All the fun dystopian things that are. I'm about to have beachfront property in central Connecticut, so so to combat that. And obviously feel free to chime in at any point, because I don't want to just free flow for an hour, but
you want to try taking it point by point?
I guess I can just make a point at this point, all the points. Really, our thoughts at this point is we want to legislate both incentivization of reduction of production of mass contributors to carbon emissions, such as let's incentivize electric vehicles. Let's incentivize, let's incentivize electric vehicles, but let's punish food waste. Let's incentivize homes that are energy efficient, but let's punish carbon taxes. And the reason for that is the mentality is that if we can make it more expensive to use carbon, then eventually it's just going to force the market to say, all right, let's really invest in solar now, because carbon is just not financially feasible anymore, right? Like let's start finding better options that are going to be cheaper than this manufactured cost of carbon at this point, this artificially induced cost. Is it going to hurt a lot of people? Yeah, yes, but it's basically saying the short term.
Let me interject real quick. So you say it's going to hurt a lot of people. Yes, it is mostly right, and I'm not going to say that this is classist of you, because I don't believe that disparate impact means bigotry. This mostly affects poor people.
Yes,
right?
It does. Yes,
higher energy costs will drastically hit poor people more than rich people.
Yeah, it's gonna, and that's a big concern, and that's why I think at this we have to couple incentivization and a reward alongside ideas of, I guess, financial punishment. So, for example,
so you both believe that green energy is more expensive than traditional
right now, it seems, yeah. With the exception of electric vehicles are becoming pretty cost effective even without subsidies. I mean, and also just a point on this, I guess 2 points. So Nate, to respond to you, then to respond to Tim with a sense of brevity, is that yes, it's going to hurt people such as us, right? such as, at least myself, I'm in the middle class life, but it's going to hurt people like us a lot more. It's going to hurt someone making 200,000 plus a year. With that said, so is the long-term outcomes of climate change. Is going to hurt the poor way more than it's going to hurt the upper class. Rich people can move.
So I think maybe a good argument is that everything hurts poor people more because they're less insulated from their environment.
Sure, basically, right? Like, if look at Puerto Rico, right? Puerto Rico's been devastated by hurricanes. Anybody with money has moved out of Puerto Rico because everyone in Puerto Rico is a U.S. citizen. If you had money, unless you had a steep loyalty to your upbringing, your area where you grew up, you have relocated at this point. But poor people that don't have those opportunities, and we're going to see more of that. We're going to see coastal areas get really hit by a lot of outcomes. The second thing is that additionally, I just want to clear out. I realize some conservatives were like, well, electric cars, electric energy still burns like fossil fuels. Like, yes, it does, but way less proportionally. It's way more energy efficient, reduces way more carbon if it reduces. Yeah, it's way less carbon to pump oil at an electric plant than it is to have gas in 300 million cars.
That's interesting. Let me just tease that for a second. I'm not an expert about this, but
I'm pulling it from expert on that
right.
one.
So let me just think about that logically. Like again, and I think we can all say here, Tim is the most engineeriest of us all. He was literally an engineer, right? He wasn't a climate scientist, but we're not experts here. So I'm just gonna bring this up. I find it really weird that stat would be true. That you say that burning oil or coal at a plant. And then
oil, not coal, oil.
Oil. So burning oil at a plant, bringing that electricity to the car with loss over the lines, and then charging the car is more efficient than having the internal combustion directly be converted into kinetic energy within the car, directly transferring down into the wheels.
Yeah, I don't understand it either. I think
internal combustion engines are extremely inefficient.
Okay, I can see that. Right, because they're so. What is it? Because is it a thing of essentially size?
If
it was something much larger,
they just have a lot of losses. The mechanics of the system just have a lot of losses. They have a lot of temperature and noise losses. True. But I forget. Don't hold me to these numbers. I can look them up while I'm talking. Probably.
You're saying thermal steam is much more efficient than combustion.
I think an internal combustion engine, at maximum, like 30% efficient at converting the energy from the gasoline into motion.
That's interesting.
But let me look it up.
I could just say now, so the cars are actually something where I was also about ready to concede a little bit of ground because the cars, especially with Tesla, are making their way forward. Obviously, there's still some problems with that, right? Because if you take this somewhat expensive solution and you universalize it, there's some issues with mining the cobalt. There's issues with mining. I'm sure it's the lithium or something like. There's like rare minerals that go into it that so right now are associated with human rights abuses, and that's not necessarily an argument against it. We should fix those human rights abuses. Yeah. Obviously.
I'll look at I don't know if you guys know at all, but there's some countries.
Hold on. Tim brought something up.
Tim, you go first.
Tim brought something up.
So here's a rough breakdown of an internal combustion engine, right? So 30% of the power of the gasoline goes towards your motion. You have friction losses, you have coolant and temperature losses, and then heat. But both of these are heat, right? But they're either lost through the coolant or through the exhaust.
There's a question and an answer. I like it.
But there's losses in everything else too, right? Power plants are generally pretty efficient, and some, especially depending on distances and whatever. And electric motors are very efficient at converting electricity to motion. In the 90s, right. So 90% plus. So, So there's, I would argue that it's probably likely that if you had the same fuel source and you turned it into electricity in a plant, transmitted that to your home, charged a battery, ran an electric car, that could be more efficient than converting that into portable gasoline, driving that to a gas station, having that pumped into your car, and then using that in an internal combustion engine.
Right. I'm going to revisit this a little bit after I get to my spiel. But it's going to have to do with, like, as long as the cars aren't subsidized and they're cheaper, that means it's probably better. But
So-
go ahead, Chris. You had a thing.
But I feel that just on that point, subsidizing the cars is kind of why we is what's going to help people that are poor access these cars sooner.
But oil right now is subsidized in this country.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. I could talk about that if you want, the subsidies. Let's do that real quick. So,
Go into this.
yeah, so there's this question of what we should and should not subsidize. And for a while, I was just doing the sort of like the normie libertarian thing where it's like, oh, well, we shouldn't be subsidizing either of them. Let the best one compete on the market. And I was thinking about it as we were preparing for this podcast, and I finally realized the purpose of the subsidies. So see if you guys think I'm wrong. So the reason why the subsidies are there for big oil is because oil and gas, well, I'm going to have to demonstrate this part, but oil and gas are by far the most efficient, unless it's nuclear. They are the bulk of the energy reserves of the world, and that is the go-to source of energy for this country. And in order to compete on the global market, if you subsidize your oil industry, it helps you get an edge on the global market. Right. So it's not that they're subsidizing oil and coal at the expense of everything else. They're subsidizing
our oil.
Energy.
Yeah, it's our oil that's subsidized, not the imported oil.
But isn't that unfair to global markets? I mean, don't we bitch about China subsidizing their materials?
Yeah, well, if you don't do it, you lose, I guess.
Yeah, so I guess we should stop bitching, huh?
Yeah, no, that's funny. It really, I guess, just go into a few other points, but really on this side of the fence, we believe that that's where legislation and policy needs to kick in again. It's like punish food waste, punish.
Talk about that food waste. You brought that up yesterday.
Yeah, let me talk about that. So food waste is actually one of those big things that is policy fixable. So already right now, we need to change the narrative as well. So I think so much in the climate change, we get fixated on this idea of like cars, right? That's like the main thing. I'm sure if you ask the average person on the street, what can we do to solve climate change? It'd be like drive an electric car, right? Or make more actually fuel efficient transportation and like less lights, that type of stuff. More like roads that are more conducive to less traffic, because that would also in turn reduce emissions. But side point. When we think about climate change, we need to think about carbon emissions in all forms. One of those being the food production industry. Everybody eats. A lot of food gets produced in this country. Half of all food produced that makes it to a grocery store is thrown out before it's consumed. And that happens in a couple ways. But of course, majority it happens at the grocery store, because what happens is human nature. We like to see things that are like plentiful, right? We like to go into the grocery store because
we like to sift.
It kicks into our brain. It kicks into our scavenger world. It's like, oh shit, look, a whole apple tree, because we see 500 apples on a stand. Yeah. And the reality is, 500 apples in that stand are not going to be sold in that community by the time all the apples go. Only the apples, because apples don't really ever go bad. But like the oranges, the kiwis, that type of stuff. And so the lettuce, like all those bags of lettuce, oh my gosh, anecdotal. I used to work at Starbucks. It was terrifying how much we threw out every day. Every single day, that whole case, guys, when you walk into Starbucks, pretty much gets thrown out at night. Like, Isn't that insane? And so when...
Well, that's good to know, actually. I always wondered about that. I was hoping they refreshed it every day.
Certain things survive for more than one day, but most part, it gets thrown out. Starbucks tries to donate it, but unless a food pantry actually comes and gets it,
right? Because that's very perishable. I mean, those things sitting in there, even in there, they're a lot of them being breaded materials are probably a little stale.
Yep, and what companies do and grocery stores do is they hold, because these things cost nothing to make, right? It's sugar, right? But it's more likely to sell if there's more of it on a shelf in the first place. So all you got to do to make your money's worth is sell like 2 out of 10 things and you're at a profit. But you're throwing.
Why don't they just put fake plastic ones in there so that you can't tell the difference?
Oh, we can tell.
People can tell, unfortunately.
I've seen some really good fake food.
Yeah. This probably should be what happens, but for whatever reason, it doesn't. And so if we created legislation, now I'm not the expert on this, so this is just coming from policy experts that I'm sure have fleshed out what this would actually look like. How do we avoid, false punishments, of food waste, but basically saying like, hey, there's actually a food cost for throwing something out. I don't know if that's proportional, like say an apple costs 80 cents. You throw it out instead of selling it because you should have sold it within the 2 or 3 weeks it would have perished. And then, maybe you owe the government 5 cents now, maybe like a little less than a 5% tax, a little more than 5%. I don't know what the actual penalty is, but basically the idea of it, the premise is that organizations and businesses will get penalized for throwing out food simply for stock purposes, right? That is an idea that would also help reduce carbon emissions because it just reduces the production in the first place. Now, that would affect people. We have to change our consumer habits because you're gonna have to realize.
Yeah, so we'll try to densen this up a little bit. I can't believe how fast the time's going. But
I know.
So just on principle, like right off the bat, like my first instinct is like, don't do that via the federal government. Maybe do that via state government, but probably start a nonprofit and educate stores as to a better way to do it. Because if there is a better way, in a more efficient way, I'm sure the companies would want to do it. That's number one. Number two, I guarantee there's going to be a certain amount of excess. And no matter how efficient you tighten down the system, you say, I think the stat that you gave was about 40% of the food production goes to waste. Maybe we can tweak that down to 30. In my experience, generally the amount of waste that exists actually exists for a reason, right? And it's stuff that you don't think about. It's like if you have a batch of fruit, some of it's going to be bad even when it gets to the store, so that's not going to get picked. And then when it's sitting on the shelf, another percentage of it's going to go bad. So maybe there's more efficient ways to do it. And I fully support people if you want to start a nonprofit, if you want to do whatever you want to do, and actually find the better solution for that, or find a productive way to get that food waste into an alternative form of food people can eat, or give it to people right off the bat. Like, I'm all for it, but I don't really penalize.
The tax is like to speed things up. It's basically create that incentive to do it. Because right now, nonprofits aren't doing this stuff, or at least not at the scale to truly combat something. Like maybe you have some cute grocery store that on the corner of New York is saying we're a zero waste grocery store. But
it's a mix of culture and desire and things. Like when I worked as an engineer, we had interns that came from Germany really often and like every 3 to 6 months. And every single time I would, get to know them and help them kind of adapt to our culture, see things. And it was shocking to me how up in arms they were about our processes. Like, we go into the cafeteria at work and they had brought metal silverware from home with themselves to use. And we were all just grabbing plastic forks, and they were looking at us like, what is wrong with you? Right. And when they would get into the cafeteria, they'd be like, why are these paper plates? Where's the actual plates? We're like, well, there isn't any. It's all paper plates in the cafeteria. And they're like, what a waste. Like, why aren't you using plates, like real plates? Like, this is stupid. You guys are so wasteful, right? They hated it. It was their culture. Every single one of them that came over here were that way. Yeah. And all of us are like, shit's easier. Just throw it in the trash and walk on, right?
And that's where policy can come in to kind of not to correct culture, because it's not saying one's better or worse than the other, but
you are saying that if you want to put a policy in place to change it, you're definitely saying one's better than the other.
Germany's more sustainable than ours. So
there you go.
Ours is more convenient, but theirs is more sustainable.
As far as climate change goes, though, we're getting off topic. I think
kind
we
of,
need to
not really. That is on topic. So energy in the food industry.
Yeah, but it is a little on topic. But to the point, though, if that is a major contributor to CO2 and emissions, then let's focus on that. Otherwise, let's focus on the low-hanging fruit first, the stuff that is a major impact first. Like, I looked it up while you were talking.
Around the country.
And particularly just cows. So beef cattle make up 2% of the U.S. emissions, right? So maybe that's not where we want to focus our time, because we could, you're squeezing blood out of a stone at that point, right? Let's maybe focus on something that makes up 30, 40, 50% of our country's emissions.
You saw it here first, guys. This is vegan meat. It's
I think there's a wiener joke in there somewhere.
Same price.
Sacrilegious. Get it away.
Tastes identical. and it's great.
You have
and-
COVID or something?
What?
I guarantee you it does not taste identical.
I haven't had meat since I was 16, and it's been a long time since I've had meat. But
Tim puts bacon on
You-
his bacon.
you
That's
eat
what
the
we're
food-
talking right now.
You
You had-
eat the food
try
that my
that.
food
Hey.
eats.
hey, so something I've done is I've had people over for cooking parties, and I've tricked them into eating this, and they're like, "Wow, these are really good." I'm like, "Yeah, they're vegan."
Yeah, I'm
That's
never
good
coming
stuff,
over
man.
your
Hey,
house.
hey,
I'm gonna
listen.
keep eating.
That's going to be my theme right there, right? So if it actually works as a replacement, people will buy it, right? So
No, I
if it's
actually
that
don't
good,
mind.
it's good.
I've had
Use
some
it.
of the vegan meat and the other things. I don't mind. I think they taste okay. They're not. They don't taste the same, but they taste fine. I don't hate them.
And-
Like if I had to eat them or they were only anything available, I wouldn't be all upset about it.
And
Right.
the cow
They're not.
industry.
So, Nate, let's get into some of the stuff you have. I know, we
Yeah,
kind of
Nate.
did a pregame on this, and you had some data and information kind of saying that I'm going to kind of summarize. So tell me if I'm wrong here, but the cost of the societal cost or the impact on people of worrying about climate change too much and forcing some of these energy changes is more detrimental. And also that you don't think that either, if I remember correctly, one, that we can actually make a difference at this point, and two, that making a difference even is that important that the side effects of climate change would even be that bad.
Right. Close. Let me give an analogy. So, for those who are familiar with Porsches and cornering, I don't know why you would be, because I don't think anybody in my audience drives Porsches. But the way that Porsches are distributed as far as the weight goes, there's this thing that makes them different than most other cars when you're cornering, which is that in most cars when you're cornering, you have to stomp on the brakes and get around that corner and slow down so you can make the corner. With a Porsche, you can't do that, because if you stomp on the brakes, all the weight's in the back of the car, the back end fishtails out, and you end up spinning out. You have to
Really?
you have to actually step on the gas to get around that corner, right? Otherwise, you're going to spin out. And I'm using this as an analogy to explain how we're going to have to deal with climate change, right? Because as Chris said, climate change is happening. According to the IPCC, we're projected to hit 2 degrees Celsius warming by 2100. I don't have much of a reason to disbelieve them, except for the fact that all the climate models in the past have been just completely wrong so far. So, and I'm sure the models are getting better. I'm genuinely, I'm not being sarcastic. I'm sure the models are getting better, but climate scientists haven't had a really good record so far. But I do believe, let's say that we are going to warm 2 degrees, because I don't actually have a reason to disbelieve that. The total amount of stuff that the Paris Climate Accord is going to do, which is really debilitating stuff to our economy, like trillions and trillions of dollars spent by each country, and in addition to switching over to inefficient alternatives, green energies, we're only going to stop warming by 0.5 degrees Celsius, right? So 75% of the warming is going to happen no matter what. So my point is, and my point of the point of the guy that I listen to for this stuff is, you need to use more. You actually have to use more fossil fuels, not less. And the reason is because out of all of the alternatives, aside from nuclear, that are being proposed, coal, oil, natural gas is the most efficient fuel that we have available. And efficient means cheap. And cheap means more energy per person, right? That helps lift the poor people in the country out of poverty. It helps poor people in other countries lift out of poverty. Because, and this is what I think what Tim was asking me, I said this is the K calories thing. Every person in this country, you consume about 2,000 calories of food a day, and that allows you to manipulate your environment and make yourself safe, walk, do things, do chores, whatever it is. But every single person in the United States also has an additional, hold on, let me pull this up here. Every person in the United States has an additional 186,000 calorie equivalent of energy behind you, keeping you alive and keeping you rich and safe in this country. right? And by calories, I mean the tractors that are on the farms farming your food, the semis bringing the food to you, the construction of your house, the construction of your environment, the car that you drive to work every day, the heat in the grocery store that's keeping your food at the correct temperature, like everything that involves energy, that involves electrical energy or thermal energy, whatever it is, amounts to 186,000 calories of energy, and that's beyond what you could have done in your primitive human form, right?
You said that's a day?
What's that?
You said it's 186 a day?
186,000 calories per day.
Yeah, so that's 6 gallons of gas.
Right, and that is what is required.
Wait. So you're saying if I drink 6 gallons of gas,
that is exactly what I'm saying.
I'll have 200,000 calories of energy.
I believe he's saying if you drink 6 gallons of gas, this will be the right and center show.
Yeah. You will host unpopular podcasts. So let me just talk about the civilization aspect real quick, and then I'll turn it over to you, Tim, because I think you have a couple things ready that you want to say about that. But it's very important to be able to think about civilization as efficient means of organizing energy. Like, this is the way that you can think about civilization, and it's important to do that, right? So, for example, this is not even really civilization, but talking about efficient use of energy in our past, right? The first leap forward of energy that we had was cooking meat, right? And that was making our meat nutrient dense, and it made us have to hunt less because our meat was worth more. It was more of a bang per buck. So you take down a deer, you get more nutrients out of it. So you have to hunt less. Our brain sizes literally started increasing as humans because we figured out how to char our meat and get the most nutrients out of it. So that's being efficient with your energy. And human civilization is literally just a story of more efficient means of energy use and new sources of energy. So, for example, let's see. Standing upright, that's a more efficient use of our energy. There's less of a waste because our upper shoulders are no longer pushing against our bottom legs as we're pushing ourselves forward. That's more efficient use of the energy that we already have. Now we can move further, right? Fire, I already went over. Horse, right? So everything think about the calories a horse eats in order to do the things it does for you. So now each person in the village, like let's say you have a family of 5, you have a horse that's eating 10,000 calories a day. Divide those calories up by the people in the household, and that's how much extra calories they have working, right? So you're building up civilization with adding systems of calories and more efficient use of the calories. The wheel, right? So transferring stuff over long distances, you have the same amount of calories in your body, but your wheel is making it so that you can use less energy to move things further.
Wheels actually consume about 10 to 12,000 calories of hay per day.
Who does?
Wheels.
Horses?
No, wheels. I'm making a joke, guys.
Right. So obviously, there's a couple different mechanisms here. There's a distinction between a new energy source, which is adding calories to each person in the civilization, and more efficient uses of the calories that you have, which is things like wheels. Less frictive things like putting boats on the water. There's less friction than there is on land, right? I'm trying to do this real quick here. So I'll move it up.
There's more friction in boating.
Is there really?
Yes.
Because you have the entire surface area on there?
Yeah.
Okay, but imagine that boat dragging across land. There's way less friction.
It's called wheels. It would be way less friction if we didn't have wheels.
Yeah, but you can't make a vessel that large because of the landscape. You can now because we have semis.
Yeah,
but
it's not about friction. It's about ease of transportation.
But it is friction in the environment, right? Because you can't move something that's okay. We're going to disagree. I promise. We'll circle back. We'll circle back after the podcast. I'll beat the shit out of you for that. Okay. So I'm just doing this real quick here. So adding new sources of energy, making more efficient use of it. We did wind and sail. We did charcoal that made us make better tools, right? Charcoal is a concentrated new form of energy, the same as coal. the same as oil, the same as gasoline, natural gas, and finally nuclear, right? And so all of these things are adding new concentrated forms of energy to the disposal of the average person, right? Because we distribute the power around the country, and the common person has access to this. The problem with the alternatives, the problem with solar and wind, is that you are no longer relying on efficient, concentrated forms of energy. I suppose I can stop my monologue there, but I'm just encouraging everybody to think about the civilization as those 186,000 calories a day. All of that is working for you. If you are a regular American, even if you're a poor American, most of those calories are still working for you. And if you start fucking with that amount of calories per person, and by calories I mean it's power, it's usually watts, it's gasoline burning, whatever it is. If you start fucking with that, civilization can literally collapse. Like we say the Stone Age, but like we can actually literally collapse civilization by reducing that by too much.
So I think your argument is completely invalid and retarded.
Hey,
pardon the word there.
No.
Like, yeah, sorry, it's old habit. Like, first off, for the most part, people aren't saying, "Hey, we need to just stop using energy," right? They're saying, "Let's use other sources," and we can get back to that topic in a second. But
I agree.
I
I know. Again, those other sources are not able to step in at this time, is what my contention will be.
Yeah, to some degree, but to a vast majority, you're also wrong there. And then second to that is, just because you can do something more efficiently doesn't mean that you have the incentive to do something more efficiently. And
totally disagree.
No, just because it's more efficient doesn't mean it's cheaper or readily available or easy or whatever, right? Like, and so
the oil industry does not want us to change.
Yeah, so just because the technology is available doesn't mean that it is readily available or that there's been the incentive to push and have it happen. So the reason I say that is a lot of the green push is to work on being more efficient and more green from a cultural standpoint. And I can go back to the example I gave before, at least in Germany, but I believe this is pretty standard across Europe. The culture is much more of a reuse and recycle mentality, right? Like they show up to the work cafeteria with knife and fork in hand, and they literally go and wash it afterwards and bring it back the next day, where our culture is we use a piece of plastic and throw it away because it's more easy.
Let me talk about that, Tim. So is it more efficient, right? Because you have to think about, and the answer is it probably is more efficient, but you have to think about that metal fork that they had. There was a certain amount of energy that went into mining the metal and then heating it up and then forming it and then shipping it, like all the stuff. So if you take the metal fork in total, there is a lot of energy associated with that.
And there's also energy associated with making a plastic fork.
Correct.
And you have to make a plastic fork every single day versus one time.
Yes, correct. And it's all a cost-benefit analysis right there, right? Because
no, it's not.
Plastic. Yeah, it literally is.
It's not a cost-benefit analysis. I'm not using a plastic fork because it's cheaper. I'm using it because it's easier. It'd be cheaper for me to buy one metal fork. It'd be cheaper for me to buy one metal fork than to go out and buy a plastic fork every day in my life.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I would agree, but then you have to maintain the fork. Again, I think so. I'm not contending. I'm using that example as a microcosm for all of the different ways that you need to think about the rest of these solutions, right? So just because you have to throw this plastic fork away every day doesn't mean it's terribly wasteful. Plastic is a byproduct of the oil that we are already using. That plastic has to get used, right? And it's the same with the plastic bags that we use at the supermarket. That's plastic. It's very cheap.
But it's also like beyond just like, byproduct or whatever. It's also consequences. Like, the reality is this stuff is also hurting our environment in terms of wildlife.
100%. So all of those externalities need to be considered. And I think your German friends are correct. when it comes down to it, despite the fact that there's vastly more energy that goes into heating the metal, making the fork, mining all that stuff, it's probably still better and more responsible to the environment to use the metal fork. But that's the way that you need to think about these things.
It's not even vastly more expensive. It's probably more expensive, but I wouldn't say vastly. I mean, I can go out and buy a 12-pack of forks like metal forks on Amazon for like $5. So they're less than 50.
Real cheap aluminum stamped ones, though.
It doesn't matter. It's reusable. It doesn't. That's not the point.
I'm saying everything is a cost benefit, and then if you wanted nice forks,
if I can get a fork for 50 cents, that means that the amount of energy and time and effort that was put into making it wasn't that great. It's not like the company's like, hey, I want to sell metal forks at a loss, right?
Yeah, you guys have actually inspired me. I realized like we have plastic spoons that we use to stir coffee with in my office. I'm ordering metal spoons right now.
Do it.
Yeah, but now you're gonna have to maintain them. You'll have to desanitize them, and you'll have to replace them.
Desanitize. That's what happens when you use them. They get desanitized.
Desanitized. Anyways, continue, Tim. You were saying something. I rudely interrupted.
I was basically saying that just because without incentive, we're not necessarily being more efficient, and we're not necessarily pushing for better energy sources, right? You have to have a drive, a reason to find these things to improve your systems, and that's what the policies would do, right? On top of that, there's a lot of disinformation, I believe, out there in regards to the cost of green energy, the viability of green energy, and how well it can overtake our current energy sources. So we talked about it briefly a second ago.
Let me make my actual point then.
To get energy sources, the oil and gas in our country, to get it at the price we do now, we put something like in the neighborhood of $20 billion a year subsidies from the government into it. Now, most of these subsidies go into energy production from in the company, so mining natural gas, coal, things like that. But still, we're subsidizing those industries to maintain these prices and to give ourselves a global leg up. And if you compare the unsubsidized cost of producing these energy sources compared to green energy sources, they're very comparable and even more expensive than green energy sources are today.
I would like to see those stats.
Okay. Let me pull it up. So here's one particular report from Lazard. I don't even know how you're supposed to say that, but this
lizard. It's a lizard person.
It's a lizard. They have a lot of different graphs, a lot of different things, but two of them that I want to show. Now, this isn't to say that everything's always cheaper or better and one's always more expensive. This is examples of certain specific situations. So the top one here is solar panels, rooftop residential. So if you're just going to buy some panels, put them on your roof, this is the cost range depending on where you live and all the things per megawatt hour compared to gas, coal. So I'm not sure gas peaking versus gas combined cycle. I have to look into that a little more probably, but these are the conventional sources. So you can see that in a lot of cases compared to nuclear, gas peaking, and on the top end of coal, just putting a solar panel on the top of your roof is cost comparative in some cases. If you start looking at commercial solar, so these types of things, they're as cheap as or cheaper then. And wind is in the same boat. Wind is very cheap compared to the conventional energy. And this graph down here shows some of the same information, but in a different way. It shows that wind, if it's subsidized, is absolutely the current subsidies for wind is way cheaper in production cost than the subsidized these are I believe this is unsubsidized coal and nuclear production. Okay. And in looking at solar here, it's in line, it's in scale as well. So to say that it's absolutely way more expensive and something we can't look into, the technology is already there. It is it is as efficient. And
So then why isn't everybody just stacking up on it?
well, again, a lot of this is comparing unsubsidized, and currently coal and things are subsidized, and there are other issues with most of the renewable
wind
energy.
and solar are the most heavily subsidized things in the nation.
No, oil and gas.
No,
They are more heavily
you don't think
subsidized.
that every state in the union doesn't have massive programs to try to get people to put solar on the roofs, and people still aren't doing it?
I believe we don't have one here in Ohio
do?
right now. But there used to be a federal program, and our boy Trump-a-Rooney, I believe, took that away.
Yeah, because it doesn't work. Let me.
But-
Okay,
Nobody took the subsidies away from oil and gas.
right? Because what I talked about before, it is the form. It is the most lucrative form. It's the best form to subsidize. So if we're subsidizing anything, we might as well subsidize that. I'm
Also,
sensitive to the argument that we shouldn't subsidize anything. Okay, I get it, 100%.
well,
But
there is a piece of the conversation too to keep in mind that oil as an industry is like the most powerful industry in the world. Like they are making billions of dollars like a minute. It is disgusting the amount of wealth that comes into some of these places, and with that comes a lot of power. If you were like a trillionaire, would you forfeit your power towards like I don't know solar panels? Probably not. I mean, the reality is like oil, gas, petroleum. These things are powerful industry, and that's something to be said about that. The lobbying power they have in Congress, the lobbying power they have in state governments, like. They can afford disgusting amounts of political power with their capital.
okay, so the number one contributor to campaigns is National Education Association, not Big Oil.
I want to
The
look into
Education
that.
Association has too much power.
It's deeper than that. It's like also lobbying of powers. It's not just like who's giving campaign contributions. It's like lobbying. It's think tanks.
Well,
it's like,
I don't think that's a fair comparison. Also, because my guess is the data you're looking at has each individual corporation separated out. So if you had BP as the second donor and Shell as the third donor, that wouldn't show up as oil and gas industry, right? It's not saying the education industry is the largest donating industry, right? Donating industry.
I don't see
it's just
in the
by
top three,
individual
I don't see
firm,
energy
right?
at all. But this is unions, I believe. Anyways, hey, that's not my real point. Okay, fine. Sure, they're powerful, but maybe they're powerful for a good reason, right? Because they're lifting millions and millions of Americans out of poverty by providing cheap, clean energy. Let me make my actual point, right?
maybe
So,
not
At their own expense. Why do we have to subsidize it?
again, right? So I said earlier, if we're going to subsidize our energy industry, and our energy industry is oil and gas, and that's the best way to go, we should maybe subsidize that. Whether we do or do not is that's sort of a libertarian versus non-libertarian argument, but that's not really a left-right or climate denial issue. That is the energy of choice in this country right now. We're subsidizing our energy of choice. If you want to change our energy of choice, you need to demonstrate that the alternatives are a better thing to subsidize. Make sense? I'm not against or for the subsidies. I say that neither here nor there in this debate, honestly. Makes sense? Let me actually make my point, because I haven't actually made my point yet. I did give a long, lengthy anecdote about how civilization should be considered in an energy system. For fun fact, by the way, the Mayan civilization is suspected to, among other stressors, one of the collapses was that a volcano put ash in the upper atmosphere. It darkened the fields. The fields became less efficient, and just that small percentage of decrease actually killed off the Mayans. Again, with
That's
other
what happened to the dinosaurs too, my dude.
Yeah, but at a much bigger scale. And anyways, here's
dinosaurs couldn't farm anymore.
Here's the main thrust of my point. Between coal, oil, gas, nuclear, what's the difference between these and the new green alternative energy sources, and why can these new ones not perform the role of the old ones? There's very solid.
I'm pretty pro nuclear.
Well, they can.
They can't. I'm going to explain why.
They can. And
I am pro nuclear. I want to say that.
Okay, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different axes that I would like to examine these fuels against each other on. Number one is price. The second one is stability. The third one is portability. The fourth one is whether it's available on demand. There's no one-word thing for that. And then the other one is density of energy, right? So we'll go through all of these real quick. So cheapness, right? We've already started debating the cheapness, right? So if unsubsidized, you can, or if you subsidize both of them the same amount, the energies come out to about the same thing, or coal and oil is less expensive, which I will explain why it is in a second using these other ones. You need to go with the cheapest one because more poor people will have better lives. They will have more money to spend on their education. They have better plastic products that are durable and last longer. And basically, the cheaper energy is in a society, the more calories that you have behind you, the longer that you live, the more fulfilled your life is, the cleaner and more safer your environment is, right? That's because we use all of this dirty energy, whatever it is, to make our environment better. We make better houses. We have cars that can drive us to medical facilities, which have energy because it's cheap, so that they can, right? It's all together, right? Civilization is one big thermodynamic system. So
it's not that simple, man. Like
it literally
based on what you're saying right now, we never needed to make more fuel efficient cars, because if we could just keep pumping the oil out at the same price or get that oil cheaper, it doesn't matter how efficient the car is.
My second example was an increase in efficiency, right? So increasing the efficiency of use is expanding your access to energy, right? Because if you have 10 energy and your car used 5 of it, you only had 5 left over. Now, if you're using 2 of it, you have 8 left over.
Yeah, but so our cars would be way more efficient if we didn't have to do any of the environmental things that we do. Like catalytic converters and all that, they cause a massive amount of back pressure in the exhaust system that causes the car to be more inefficient. And a lot of the other things that we do for emissions causes the car to be a lot more inefficient, right? They have to run at a certain leanness so that you don't have extra material that didn't burn up in the exhaust and all of these things, right? And some of that helps efficiency, and some of it actually hurts efficiency.
Okay, so that's a cost benefit right there. So I'm not going to argue that right now because I have to get through all 3 of these. But that would be a cost benefit, right? If the impact of the environment,
we shouldn't do any of that. We should only focus on how we can.
Did you just hear my analogy of 5 and 2 and 8 and whatnot? I just said if you more efficiently use your energy, it is now cheaper because you used less of it, and you can use more.
I'm telling you that we are being less efficient by being clean with our cars.
And I'm telling you that I don't have time to address that argument right now. The argument that efficiency is a good thing is 100% me. I just made that. My second one was literally standing upright makes you use your calories more efficient, right? That was my second argument. So efficiency means more access to energy. Okay. So talk about the catalytic converter later if we have time. The second characteristic. So the first one, again, cheap. If it's cheap, more poor people have access to it. They have better lives. They live longer. Their atmosphere is cleaner because we clean it using energy. We keep the environment off people by building stuff, right? Building stuff to protect people is how we go forward, not reverting to nature. Number 1, cheap. Number 2, stable versus unstable. Coal, gas, oil, nuclear. Stable. They don't fluctuate. That's very important for a power grid.
What do you mean by stable?
They don't fluctuate.
So you mean that they're readily available as a constant power source, not that a gallon of gasoline.
That when you want to run it. Okay, I'm conflating these 2 things here. There is a distinction, and I might not be smart enough to get it down right here on the podcast, but there's a distinction between stability and being available on demand. So being stable means that as you're running it, it doesn't fluctuate, right? There's no sine wave. There's no stock market thing going on with it. It just runs, and you can control it.
You use all of those fuel sources to turn a turbine or some other method to make electricity via generator, and generators all create electricity through sine waves. All the electricity comes out the same.
Not if the wind is blowing.
Yeah, hydroelectric produces it the same as wind.
Okay, I didn't say hydro was bad.
Steam turbine. How do you think a coal power plant produces electricity? It heats
Dude, I know
water.
how that works.
I
have no problem with
heat
hydro.
water into steam to turn a turbine and create electricity.
I'll say it again. I have no problem with hydro.
I'm trying to understand what your point on stability is.
My point is that when you start a coal plant, you have control over the output, right? So the output goes up and it stays level. There's no fluctuations in your output unless you want there to be. With wind and solar, you only get energy from solar when the sun is up, when the clouds aren't there. In the winter, you get less of it because if you're at a northern climate, right? So that kind of thing.
So that's consistent availability, which was the other thing you said.
No, that's predictable. That's not consistent, and it's not on demand, which is my fourth characteristic. So you don't need energy just when the wind is blowing or when the sun is out. You need energy when you need it. So it needs to be available on demand. So, for example, right now, our lights are on because it's dark out. Right,
okay,
that's why we turn our lights on. So we start using electricity when the sun goes down.
Let me ask you if you see the similarity here.
Well, I turn my lights on for left, right, center show.
Yeah, that's right.
So
we all live in the dark. We're gremlins.
Coal, oil, gas, all of that stuff. There's a process done to mine the energy source, right?
I will get to that.
Hold on. I want you to see this analogy. This is important because this doesn't go to. This is on stability or availability or whatever I'm talking about. So you mine all this stuff, you transport it to the energy plant, and they have a stockpile of energy bricks, okay, let's just say chunks of energy in the form of coal sitting there ready to go, okay? And when you need more power, they throw more coal in. When you need less, they burn less. Whatever, okay, simplified. So how is that so different than with solar or wind, using these solar and wind plants to generate these energy bricks that are then stored in batteries, and that battery sits there and waits until you need it to kick on and give you the power you need?
It doesn't. So we do not have the technology to store energy from a power grid.
We have the technology, we don't have the infrastructure, and it's not the cheapest thing to do.
Why do we not have the infrastructure, Tim?
Because it's new.
Because it's expensive as all
fuck.
Fuck.
Why did everybody not own a Model T when the first Model T was invented? They're new. They take a while.
No,
that's the same thing. Energy storage is
Listen,
cheap.
Tim, if what you're telling me is correct, then we need to do that right now, and I'm 100% behind it. Yeah, so there's no argument here.
It's correct. I'm not saying I'm not saying it is. Energy storage is not the cheapest thing, and electrical energy storage is not the cheapest thing or easy, and it has its own
complications. Electrical energy storage is not feasible at this point.
It is feasible. It is feasible. It is massively feasible.
We literally cannot universalize the amount of batteries that it would take to hold energy that the U.S. power grid would use. It's not feasible.
There's a lot of different ways that you can store it, and it's not just in batteries.
Okay. Let me finish up. Okay, let me finish up my points real quick, and then we can talk about that because I really want to talk about that.
The whole point I was making is that, like, if you stopped mining coal,
let me explain.
I
have a visual.
If you stopped mining coal, you would not have a stable energy source, right? So I was trying to make the analogy that mining coal is similar to collecting energy from wind and solar when those sources are available, and you store them and use them when they're needed. I'm not trying to make the point that infrastructure is in place right now. It is not.
And I'm suspecting the reason why it's not in place is because it's not financially viable. And financially viable goes to cheap, right? This is not a cheap way to do it.
It's a combination of things. It's a combination of things. It's not the cheapest way, but that doesn't mean that it's not financially viable or shouldn't be done at all.
It shouldn't be done if it's not cheaper. If you include all the externalities, including environmental cleanup of CO2. If it's not cheaper, you should not do it.
That is 100% not a valid point of view. You have to look at everything included. I mean, but you're not. That's the point. Like if I said, hey, do you want to buy this handgun that when you shoot it has a 50% chance of backfiring and shooting you in the face, or this handgun that's twice as expensive but it's not going to shoot you in the face? Well, that one's cheaper. I should use that one. No, you have to take everything into account, right?
I just said that.
Right. I said if using coal and oil is going to ruin the environment and make it so that we can't farm in our existing farmlands, and we have to move all of our farmlands to new areas based on new climate that's going to be massively more expensive than just creating a battery farm, right? Then why is that not something you should take into consideration?
If that math that you just did is correct, I'm on board with it. I'm telling you, your math is wrong.
I didn't do that math. But
correct. You didn't do that math.
I'm telling you that your math
that
is
math
wrong.
Doesn't exist.
I've already shown you that the studies are showing that clean energy, wind and solar, are on par with cost of energy creation with unsubsidized oil and gas and coal, and that's only going down. If you look at the if I find it, you look at the trend of energy costs for solar and wind, and these are only these two energy production sources, but you can see how fast they are declining over time.
Yep.
Right, and they're likely to continue to decrease because this is a new technology, whereas oil, gas,
what
and
does the trend line tell you? Looks like solar's plateaued, my man.
No, it's not done.
Come on, dude.
Yeah,
hey, don't. Hey,
if you draw this out, it continues to go down. But if you look at oil, gas, and coal, their ancient technologies are not going to continue to go down. Now we are reaching the point, I think, on solar where they're getting to pretty much what their max efficiencies are with current technologies. But that can change if they come up with some new stuff. But anyway, the point is, it is already on par.
I have a visual, Tim. I have a visual.
Okay,
this is what I'm talking about when I say that wind and solar are not stable, right? So part of the cost calculus, and we mentioned this a little bit earlier, and you really need to understand this because this is really important. And you'll actually get this, Tim, I'm pretty sure, because you're an engineer. So wind and solar are so unstable. You see this? This is the energy output. This gray is energy output of wind, and this black is the energy output of solar, right? And this is over 1 year length of time. I also have, if you do over 1 month, so we can see each day. Hold on. Pull this up. So this is over 1 month, right? So in each day, you can see a massive spike right around the middle of noon, right? And while the sun's up, the wind is blowing. And so the two of those combine into very large spikes. These spikes do not line up with energy consumption, right? So people use energy more later in the day when they're home and they're cooking and they have the lights on and they're doing whatever at home, right? So these things are very unstable. And so when you go back to this image, what you have to do is in order to have this stuff on a grid, you need, ironically, oil and coal to be smoothing over those edges, right? So you need to be able to have that stable energy, and that is not provided by wind or solar, because wind or solar, the more you add to it, the higher the fluctuations get.
This goes back to what I just said before. Don't look at wind and solar energy production as it has to be used right now as it's being produced. If you do that, you can't look past the fact that it's a cyclical production. What you're saying is like saying, hey, we have to mine coal at an even pace 24/7. We can't only work during the normal 8-hour days mining coal and stockpiling it to use it later.
Mining coal is like mining batteries.
No, mining coal is like collecting the wind and solar, filling batteries. Now, the difference is the infrastructure isn't in place right now.
The infrastructure doesn't exist because it's not cost efficient. What I mean by that, when I am saying that it is not cost efficient, that means that people suffer. Either the amount of calories per person goes down and your quality of living suffers drastically and civilization can collapse, or you are increasing the cost that people have to put towards their energy, right? That hurts poor people. When I say that it is more expensive, when I say that in order to build these, garage-sized batteries that you would need in order to sustain the American energy grid.
You're not taking into account if the gun 50% of the time is going to shoot you in the face.
What does that analogy mean?
You said earlier you have to take all the externalities into account.
Yes, that includes the CO2 released from coal and oil.
Yeah, and you're not taking any of it into account. You simply are just saying, oh, it's not as expensive. Oh, it's cheaper. Oh, it's cheaper. We shouldn't look into anything else because it's not cheaper yet.
I'm saying, literally, cheap, stable. portable, which means it can go into the tractors that are picking your food, right? It can also push ships across the ocean. You can't do that with solar, right? Unless you find a way.
Have a gas-powered cell phone.
Listen, man, you're being deliberately facetious now. Obviously, there's batteries, but battery tech is not there yet.
It's portable. Obviously, it's in your pocket.
Yes, you're being facetious, man. Obviously, I'm aware of. What was my first concession to Tim? I'm sorry, to Chris. What was the first thing that I said my concession was going to be?
My phone actually only functions as long as it's attached to the wire.
My first concession, Tim, was that battery technology is getting pretty good. It's good enough so that cars have enough energy stored within them so that they can be portable. So if that technology gets better and you can actually buffer out all of those spikes that wind and solar give you, then maybe it's plausible. But again, so let me pull this up one more time. So if you do the yearly thing, look at this. Solar's doing nothing in the winter. That's not good. So why are you using solar? Right? It needs to be there when you need it. And in the winter, you need more energy than you do in the summer. Yes.
So are you saying that we should do no oil and gas mining in Alaska because they can't mine it in the winter because it's too cold?
Obviously not. I have no idea what you're trying to say.
Again, it's about you're viewing wind and solar as if the future of wind and solar. I'm not talking about today's use, okay? I'm talking about 10 years, 20 years down the line. I'm not, because that's not what policy is trying to do. Policy is
Policy is for today.
They're not trying to come in and say tomorrow, shut down all your oil and gas plants.
But they're trying to phase without a plan.
No, they're trying to create a plan. The
technology is not there for the plans they are creating.
It is. And you and the people you listen to are too obtuse to read it or something.
Show me the technology. I'm serious. Either of you, show me the technology that they are building policy right now around that's going to literally end the country.
The goal is to incentivize, the technology that will be tomorrow's technology to be closer to tomorrow.
Chris, I agree with you. Are you willing to make a policy right now that counts on that technology being available, even though you have no proof that it exists yet?
Yes, it does exist.
Technology exists. It's improving upon the technology to make it fully feasible and having a very gradual release to get there.
As per Tim's graph, solar's not getting any better.
As per my graph.
Yeah, your graph of solar and even wind, those prices are bottoming out. They're not getting any better. So
no, they aren't getting as better as they were the years before. But just between 2018 and 2019, it got 5% cheaper. At the bottom of that graph, that was still a 5% improvement in cost, roughly. I just did it super quick.
So both of you. So there's huge problems with this. Like, again, this stuff is arguably more expensive, especially since you actually have to have a gas and coal backup because wind and solar fluctuate. So keep in mind about that. You're going to have dual infrastructure, which is expensive because you need gas and coal in order to smooth out those bumps, unless we have Tim's mythical batteries, which I'm just saying they do not exist. And we don't know when they're going to exist because we don't know if we can do that.
You haven't listened to what I'm saying, though. Batteries are not the only source and will likely not be the main source of storage for this. I shouldn't say that. You could use capacitors, but that's not a real good way to do it. But a lot of the stuff that people are looking into is mechanical storage. So similar to hydroelectric, where when you have solar,
you get a giant wheel spinning.
That's one of the ways, actually. Yeah, angular momentum storage. Yeah, flywheel storage is something that they're looking into, or that I've seen. It's already there. It's not like they're looking into it. These exist. They're being installed. Like cool. They're not fictitious future technology.
So can you explain to everybody what this past 15-minute argument has been about? Because I'm sure I wasn't very eloquent about it. So go ahead.
Okay, so
it's a little bit beyond me, to be honest. I don't really understand what's been going on.
From what I guess what I'm trying to say, what I was trying to do was, I understood your point to be saying that oil and gas are, at least some combination of these things, better at portability, stability, efficiency, cost.
Yep. Density.
And so density doesn't matter.
Density does matter, but we can go into that.
To some extent, but generally not. It matters only for portability, and if you can already show that something's portable, then density doesn't matter.
Disagree. Like thinking about nuclear, but we can talk about that later.
So my argument is that on a lot of these points, your data is incorrect. Right? Renewable sources of energy are as cheap or cheaper in many cases today than oil and gas, and are continuing to get cheaper and will surpass oil and gas, in my opinion, and from what the data is showing, significantly in the next coming 10 years.
I gotta say, that's your opinion, though. You just showed me data that clearly showed the prices leveling off, like very clearly.
And like I said, that leveling off was on the last piece of that graph, that last one where it was level, was a 5% reduction in cost.
Yeah, that's logarithmic. So next time it's going to drop by 2%.
It's not necessarily logarithmic. It
pretty much looks logarithmic.
Like if you were to look at
pull it up. Let's look at that sucker. I'm telling you, that's not getting any more efficient.
Look at the wind, right? Like this is not a logarithmic chart, right? Solar is more logarithmic, and like I said, with solar, the issue here is actually they're reaching the limit of what they can do from efficiency with a solar panel, with existing technologies. So this is flattening off because you can't squeeze more juice out of that technology right now.
Right. Again, we're also just talking about one facet. I'm sorry, I challenged you on again, so we're focusing back in. Let's bring it out high level.
What I'm saying is it is portable, and actually it's more portable than oil and gas.
Can you drive a ship across the ocean with it yet?
With what? With batteries?
With that energy source.
Yes, you could, but not
a cargo ship right now.
So hold on. So let me say this: every energy source is not as efficient for every single usage. Right? There's a reason you don't have a gas-powered cell phone. It's not as suitable for cell phone powering, right? There's also a reason that you don't have battery-powered trucks driving across country. It's just not as suitable. People talk about EVs all the time, and the argument really bothers me where they're like, yeah, but I need I need 500 plus miles per drive, and then if I want to recharge it, I got to sit there for 3 hours. What if I want to drive across the country? Great. Guess what? EVs aren't the best solution right now. Probably won't be for a long time, if ever, for driving cross country.
Right.
That doesn't mean they're not a better solution for what you do 99% of the time, which is drive from your house to your job and back again.
Right. And we're not arguing. So
the point I'm trying to make to you
better, use it.
The point I'm trying to make to you is maybe batteries or electric storage technology is not going to replace cross-oceanic travel for cargo ships. That may stay diesel. That may stay gas.
Right.
That may stay whatever. Right.
Let me explain. Let me explain, Tim, to Chris real quick and the audience. So I'm sorry. Like a lot of times, like we do the high level, and then sometimes me and Tim know what we're talking about, so we don't really explain. So the big issue that I have, and I know I was talking fast when I went over this. So this right here again. So this is a graph of during the day. So you can see each one of these is a day. This is the amount of energy produced during a time period, right? So you can see spikes in the middle of the day. To my point, not all these spikes are the same height, right? So even in different days, it spikes at different heights. But my point is that when the energy is generated, which is usually mostly in the middle of the day when the wind is blowing and the sun is shining, we're not ready to use that energy, right? So we have all of this energy being generated by wind turbines and by solar, and we're not ready to use it. There's nowhere for it to go, right? And so the main contention between me and Tim, among other things, in the last 15 minutes is that there is no actual way to store this energy until the power grid is ready to use it, right? And therefore, my contention was it's not a good solution because you essentially have to just not generate that power. Otherwise, you're going to have to sell it to a different country. You're literally going to have to, like Germany. Germany had some spikes where they had to sell power to different countries because there was too much on their grid. They literally had to pay people to use their energy. So you have problems like that. But what Tim's talking about, I find incredibly interesting. And what he's talking about is you actually take the energy that's generated during the day when you don't really need it as much, and you can actually spin up a massive, really heavy wheel, and you get that wheel spinning, and it just keeps going with that kinetic energy. And then at night, you sort of engage the bristles on that, and then you start generating electricity off of it. And so now when you actually need the power, it's still in there in that massive spinning flywheel, which I'd never thought about before. So that's amazing. Right there, that will actually start making wind and solar far more viable because the energy will be available on demand. It will be stable since it's coming off a damn flywheel.
There's a lot of
certain extent, Tim. Right?
There's
so
a lot of mechanical ways that they're doing this. So that's one of the ways. The pumping of water to higher altitudes and then using hydroelectric again, right? To generate electricity like we normally do now through hydroelectrics. Right. Another way that they're talking about pressurization of capsules, caverns. They've talked about using old mines for pressurization, where you fill it with pressurized air and you use that to generate spin turbines. There's another one that is really interesting that I've seen recently that they're actually building, I think in the Middle East somewhere, where it's basically a building that is just a bunch of cranes in a way, and they stack these mega weight blocks, these things weigh tons, and they stack them during the day using electric motors that are driven by solar and wind and all of that to stack all these blocks up and make a tower. And then throughout the night, these things use those blocks and lower them back down to the ground and use the potential energy of the weights being stacked up high to run those. And the response times and the power stability and stuff that they can get is very similar to what you can get from a coal power plant right now as well. And just so you know, coal power plants do take a bit of a ramp up. They have to burn enough material.
I know. So every system has its inefficiencies.
Right? I'm just saying they're not instantaneous. It's not like it's just available.
Okay.
So, but there's the reason I'm saying all these, and I'm not naming all of them. There are countless methods of storing energy, and the more that we incentivize people to research this and investigate this and to develop these, the better they're going to get. But we already have the technology to do it now. The infrastructure isn't there. And to your point, why aren't we doing it now? Because it's newer. It takes time to get this stuff in place. If you already have, if you're a business and you already have a coal power plant in place and you have all of the infrastructure, then you continue to use those things. You don't just turn them off.
Right. Okay. So the thing is that I'm actually not ideologically driven on this. So when you come up with a solution like that and you say this will actually be more efficient, and then we can prove that it's more efficient, and in effect, in the end, it lowers energy costs, I am 100% down for it.
Okay, right? So now you're going back to what the part of my argument was before, which is purely looking at energy cost is not appropriate.
Energy cost equals less dead people. It's that simple. The more energy that you have, the more civilization advances.
You basically are saying you believe that climate change will have no adverse effect on humankind.
No, I literally did not say that.
Then you have to
only outlining the positive.
No, you said until alternative methods of energy become more efficient or cheaper, basically don't fucking worry about them.
Okay, so by cheaper,
it then says any side effects from the existing methods don't matter.
Let me talk about that really quick, okay? So externalities should be costs, right? A lot of people consider carbon taxes taking the cost of carbon, right, because it affects our atmosphere, and placing it on the individual. They consider that adding it to the cost. I don't particularly like that because the globe is warming, so it's already done, so why would we make poor people suffer right now? I look at all of these externalities, right? So the sea level is going to go up. Various things are going to change, right? It's going to get warmer, all this different stuff. A lot of those things are going to have weird effects that you can't really calculate. The climate's going to change in certain ways. People are going to have to move. But it's all of those things happening, right? Relocating an entire city or geoengineering around a city, whichever you talk about, the cost of that is going to be less than if you start prohibiting fossil fuels without an alternative. That I'm
give me that data.
Consider all of those things together, all of the externalities, the floods, whatever it is. Data. Was that?
Show me that data.
Yeah, you're gonna have to. So Go
Don't
out
say
and
I'm going
buy,
to take your word for it.
go out and buy what is it? The Moral Case for Fossil Fuels by Alex Epstein.
Yeah, I went through all those graphs you sent me. 90% of those are complete bullshit.
I would love to hear you say that to my face.
I just did.
No, I'm kidding. We're like, oh man, we're like way over our time. I knew we were going to go a little bit later anyways tonight. I think
Those graphs are like, here's how much energy consumption mankind uses, and here is the.
I told you some of those were correlation causation, and I didn't agree with that.
Most of them are. Most of them have nothing to do with each other. It's look,
okay,
energy consumption goes
yes,
up, so life expectancy is also going up. So obviously, the more energy we use, the longer we're going to live.
Well, there is a correlation. I'm just going to say, and it makes sense.
Related.
It's unrelated. It's unrelated. So let's stop all fossil fuel use right now, which is our energy generation, and we'll see how life expectancy goes.
It's not causal.
Oh, that's not causal. I'm serious. Let's stop all energy production right now, and we'll see if it's not causal.
You're making an asinine argument.
That is the exact point you are making.
Because we're using more fossil fuels does not mean we are living longer. Technology
is driving clean energy.
No, it's not. Technology is driving increase in life expectancy, and technology is also driving increase in fuel usage. But
so sounds good to me. Life expectancy is going up.
Yeah, everywhere, even in countries that aren't using more fossil fuels.
You mean the countries that are starting to implement fossil fuels, right?
No, that's already up in a lot of those countries. And if you look at Europe, who has been reducing their carbon footprint and their fossil fuel usage, their life expectancy didn't go down. It's not like they're sucking in the exhaust out of their gas pipes to stay alive.
Okay, but energy costs in Germany are 4 times what they are in the United States.
Man,
that means they have less money
to do pretty good over there. Yeah, they don't spend it on all their healthcare administrators.
Yeah, well, I mean, now we've gotten into a whole bunch of things. Let me just show you. Okay, so we're over. Chris looks kind of bored. Let me do one more thing.
Yeah, go for it.
Let me just do this. This is probably one of the most interesting things that I didn't know. Tim, I hope you have something for this. We can't spend too much time on it, but this is the diminishing returns on CO2 put into the atmosphere.
Oh yeah.
You ready for that one? Okay, so it turns out apparently that the amount of CO2 put into the atmosphere has diminishing returns as to how much heating it creates. Right? So I'll bring up the graph. So as you put more parts per million of gas into the atmosphere, it's not linear. You don't just put every 100 million parts every 100 parts per million or whatever it is, you go up. You don't get X amount of heating. You get much less as time goes on, right? So this is how much carbon was in the air previously. This is how much we are at now, and then this is 2 times industrial, right? So as this goes up, the amount of CO2 that you put in the atmosphere has less and less of an effect on the warming.
And this was shocking to you?
I didn't know it. I don't think anybody knows it.
So let's think of it this way. So again, that's a useless data point. It doesn't matter. First off, all of that is taken into calculations when they do. It's not like you just showed this to me and now some climate scientist is going to watch this podcast and be, fuck, we didn't know that. We've been calculating all the temperature rise, assuming that it's linear. No, they already know that. And second to that, it's like saying that I'm laying out in the winter in the cold, and me putting on one blanket has the same effect as as a linear effect linearly of me putting on 10. The warmth that I'm going to feel from it. No, you're going to see a much greater impact from your first blanket or your second blanket than your 10th or 11th or 12th.
I know, you're just analogizing it. Like, I understand how that works.
Yeah, it's the same thing. Well, okay, imagine if there was 0 atmosphere on this planet and then you gave it some. That's going to have a massive impact on how much heat the Earth can retain versus if you're just making it a little thicker and a little thicker and a little thicker. Right, it's not a linear thing. You wouldn't expect it to be.
But it's not thicker. It's the actual effect that carbon, the unique characteristic that carbon has, that's a warming effect. that unique characteristic. It's not about the thickness of the atmosphere. It's about the fact that carbon is an actual greenhouse gas, which means it traps heat, right? But that trapping effect is what they're talking about. That trapping effect is reduced. It's not linear. So eventually, according to that graph, you just keep pumping out, and we're not there. I'm not advocating for this, but if you just keep pumping out all of the CO2 that's trapped in all of the coal under the earth, you're not actually going to just keep heating the earth. There is a reduced effect, and it's logarithmic, right? It actually stops after a while, and by stops, I'm aware of what logarithmic is, but like the effect basically stops warming.
What does that matter?
That means that means that people sacrificing the amount of energy that they have available to them, or the quality or the availability of the energy that they have to them, is going to have much larger impacts to them right now than the effect of global or CO2 or global
no, that's not what it
have.
means. But that's a false that's a false. I don't know the word I want to say. Like joining of thoughts. Yeah. It doesn't matter if it's a linear effect or a logarithmic effect or whatever. That graph has nothing to do with time. It has to do with amount in atmosphere versus temperature rise effect. Not is it going to affect you 5 years from now or 10 years from now?
No, this has to do with the warming effect. Oh, it's gone.
I understand. It's saying that the higher the parts per million in the atmosphere that is carbon dioxide, or I think that actually was greenhouse gases, it is a non-linear, so parts per million versus downward forcing watts per meter squared, or energy absorption, right? So the amount of energy that a meter squared area of, which is odd that they did it in area, not volume, but I guess it kind of makes sense. The amount of energy that an area of air can absorb based on the density of that material, or the parts per million of that material being CO2, right? That shouldn't be linear. And the fact that it isn't has anything to do with it. What this graph is showing you is where we were pre-industrial, where we are now, and where 2 times pre-industrial amount would be. And you're looking at it and you're like, oh, look, hey, that's only from 30 watts per meter squared up to 34, but maybe 4 watts per meter squared is enough that we all die. This graph doesn't say anything about that. This graph doesn't have any information on that at all. It doesn't say anything other than this is a non-linear relationship, which has no meaning.
It's a part of my larger argument, Timothy.
All of your arguments have been like this. They actually hold no water, don't have much meaning behind them.
Okay, again, let me just wrap this up because we're pretty much done here because it's late. You need more fossil fuels.
You'll like this.
It's going to help you survive what's inevitably already coming.
This is interesting. This will help your argument, I think, because of how you want to look at this stuff. Only 5% of the total incoming solar energy from the sun is absorbed as greenhouse gases is affecting the warming of the planet. It's only 5%. So we don't even need to fucking worry about it. It's only 5% total.
Quiet down now, Timothy. Now you're just making fun of me. Okay, all right. We're pretty late now. I don't know if you guys want to tie it up a little bit. I talked a lot, so.
I'll be honest. I'm a bit lost in the conversation.
I'm sorry. It got kind of technical.
It got really technical, and that's okay. It's okay. I'm sure like there's people that really need to hear that. And so for me, I think the compromise is we just need to develop technology as quickly as possible to move climate change towards like a controllable thing.
Right, and I think it's to conclude. I think it's a human rights issue. If you start removing the ability of third world countries to use fossil fuels, you will condemn them to poverty forever, unless these other technologies somehow, Timothy, become more efficient and more stable and better.
The only way that's going to happen is if you incentivize it. Right?
No, how about the free market, man? Who incentivized coal? Who incentivized oil? And when it started out, private investors, and it became lucrative for them. So
Yeah.
they did it themselves.
They didn't have
Which is
another
what
thing
your
pushing to get
technology
it done
should
faster. If we didn't have global warming, if there was no side effect of using that energy source until natural occurrence from the free market resulted in a new energy source that was more efficient, I would 100% be on board with you. And this is what I keep repeating, and that you say you're taking into account externalities and all the other things
with
like climate
all of
change,
those externalities
but
included.
You're not. You're saying I believe
I
it's happening, but then you're discounting the fact that it has any value at all. You
That's
keep
not
saying
It's
until
going to
those
cost
things happen.
trillions of dollars to relocate people, and it still will be cheaper if we just keep using fossil fuels.
It will not. And you
Yeah,
and you even
$1 trillion one-time payment to move people.
It's not just moving people.
I'm aware. I'm being obviously I'm being reductive, but
I mean,
there's costs associated with
the city of New York were to flood.
Tim,
you had to
that warming is happening already, anyways.
It doesn't have to.
No, it literally does. Okay, by the IPCC's own report, right? This is the UN, all the big people that everybody cites. We are going to get it if we do all of this crap and ruin our economies. And it sans the flywheels. I like that idea, but like if we do all this crap and cripple our economies, we're going to get it down by half a degree. It's still going up by 1.5 degrees. That is happening.
So what? You think that the stop point is 2? It's never going to go above 2 degrees?
No, I don't know. I don't know. Hopefully,
like
the
you're acting
like
like we're only ever going to. First off, it would go up more than just to 2. The 2 degrees is if we did the old plan. Right now, they're saying we need to step it up. Second off, the IPCC is only looking at the effect of greenhouse gases, and they're saying what's already in the atmosphere is going to cause a 1.5 degree rise. I agree with you on that, but that doesn't mean we can't stop that from happening with other things. Now, I'm not necessarily on
that 1.5 is happening.
Does not mean that. I'm not on board necessarily with doing some of these things, but geoengineering can keep that from happening. And this is something that we talked very briefly about when we did our pre-talk. But there are people, companies, and organizations looking into doing geoengineering that will reduce that. So yeah, the greenhouse gases would result in 1.5 degree rise. But if we put particulate in the air, something like imagine a volcano going off, why the global temperature drops with that? Because the particulate reflects more sunlight. So that chart that I just showed, 59% of sunlight reflected.
I just got to say, Tim, real high level, civilizations end when it gets colder. They don't end when it gets warmer. Civilization started because it got warmer. You know what I'm saying? Like, so just as a real high level, that's not a technical argument, but I'd be very fucking careful about making the planet colder.
Okay, I agree. Again, I said I'm not 100%. I'm not. Yep. I don't want to say any percent. I don't know enough about geoengineering, but it's possible that it doesn't have to go up to 1.5%. So if 1.5% was detrimental, we could figure something out.
Now,
but to say
if those solutions exist, keep using the most efficient fuel source and geoengineer.
Geoengineering is, in my estimation, more risky than.
Okay, so now you're backing off of it because you're not so sure about it.
No, I said that I'm not on board with geoengineering.
Okay, all right. I know,
I'm just saying that
gotcha. I'm just saying, like, everything's a cost benefit.
I agree, but what we didn't get to because we got a little into the weeds on some stuff, and what I keep going back to is the discussion I think we have is more along the lines of why you think the benefit, why you don't think there's any cost to global warming.
I've told you several times there's going to be a massive.
I know. You keep saying that, but then you say, but it's not worth being less efficient with our energy.
How about we stop fossil fuels for you? Okay, we're going to make you live on wind and solar right now.
Nobody's trying to do that. They are not doing that. Show me one piece of legislation that says in 2021 all fossil fuel has to stop.
Okay, the rhetoric coming from the left was a couple years ago that the Earth was going to end in 12 years. Right, that was the actual rhetoric from your girl AOC over there.
I also wanted to show you something else.
Wait. No, we can't.
No, this is important. You said that all of the prediction. No, you said all of the predictions were inaccurate. So I'm trying to show you you're wrong.
No, not the modern ones.
This one's from 1980.
Okay, what's that?
That the black line is the prediction.
So you had one that was accurate. Okay, what about the one that said it was going to be global
that
cooling?
One? The black line is the prediction. It's not that far off.
Okay, so now you're cherry picking.
One. No, I'm showing you all of these different ones. The black line.
Listen, so you went.
The black line.
So look, man, I'm not saying you did this on purpose, but you went to an article that found all of the ones that happened to be correct.
No, do you see the name of this article?
Vast majority of the other ones, the ones that said that there was going to be a global cooling period, the ones that said that it was going to shoot straight up, that like all of it, the ones that said that billions of people were going to die between 2000 and 2010. Like you're not looking.
You're cherry picking the ones that
happen to be right.
No, this is the one that you had in your paper. No, these are the ones that you had in your the Hansel ones. This one right here is the one you had in your paper.
Okay,
that showed that it was inaccurate. And my what I'm showing is they're not that inaccurate.
I didn't give you references on the studies that said I should have brought those up. That's my fault. But I didn't give you references on the ones that said there was going to be an ice age, Timothy.
These are from the links that you sent. Had one of these in there, and that was this one where he said it's inaccurate. Yes, he did in that.
Did he?
Yes. It was your link you sent to me, and that's what made me pull these up. But the majority of them are fairly accurate. They're not perfect. They're predictions, and they're not going to be perfect.
Okay, well, someone's lying. We'll have to hash this out. Because the one I'm looking at, the one he's showing, like the one he's showing is literally significantly different than that.
Yeah, that's Hansen, I think. It looked
okay.
Which
all
one
right.
We've
already gone super late. I appreciate everybody if anybody's hung out with us this long. I'm sorry, but we got into the weeds. I think sometimes we get into the weeds on a lot of this stuff, and the problem is that these issues are, everybody likes talking about them. Not a lot of people, including us, know enough to really come up with the solutions for this stuff. So, at the end of the day, as usual, we're trying to give you the left, right, and center perspective, but
today just the right and center. Sorry, Chris.
Yeah, sorry, Chris.
Oh, you're fine. I do have to cook dinner, guys. So
that's okay. So we're gonna sign off. Thanks everybody for hanging out. We really enjoyed this conversation. I did. Sorry, Chris, again.
You're fine. You're fine.
We'll work on this format better in the future, but I like doing this in-depth kind of stuff. We'll try to make it a little bit more palatable in the future. Yeah. So, man, I'm tired. Thanks everybody for hanging out. Click the like button and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
See you guys. Wind and solar for the win.